Part 30. Martial Arts, Become Invincible starting from the full-level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at Westlake. Chapter 291. On the surface, Xiao Wuji's mission was to suppress bandits, but in fact, it was essentially counterinsurgency. It's just that Yuan Xiong wanted to save some face for the deposed king of Yu, so he said it was to suppress bandits. I think this is what Emperor Jingtai meant. After all, King Feiyu was dead. Emperor Jingtai wanted to save some dignity for his dead son, and did not want him to be accused of treason after his death. This group of bandits is in Yuezhu, which is the southern border. Xiao Wuji said. That's right, this bandit suppression must be guaranteed to be flawless, and at the same time, the lost ordnance of the imperial court must be recovered. You can rest assured that you will be the third brother. Yuan Xiong looked at Xiao Wuji and said, judging from the number of weapons, this group of bandits has at least tens of thousands of people. In order to ensure that this group of bandits are wiped out, you can go directly to the Huainan Palace in Black Eagle City to mobilize troops. King of Huainan? He is not. That's right. Yuan Xiong smiled and nodded. King Huainan is the father of Princess Xinran. Now Princess Xinran is your subordinate. With this relationship, King Huainan will not embarrass you. Xiao Wuji's mouth twitched and he said, it turns out that third brother has already thought about it. The reason why Princess Xinran was transferred to my command is because of today, right? Third brother, you are really far-sighted. Yuan Xiong laughed loudly. What kind of foresight is just a coincidence? Princess Xinran said that she would come to Bijinfuzi to serve as a royal guard. Can the third brother refuse? If the third brother dares to refuse, Princess Xinran will burn the third brother's beard. As for why Princess Xinran was transferred to serve under you, that was not chosen by the third brother, but by Princess Xinran herself. I don't know what's good about you, but Princess Xinran is interested in you. Yuan Xiong touched his chin and looked around Xiao Wuji, trying to see what attracted Xia Xinran to Xiao Wuji. Xiao Wuji said expressionlessly, third brother, don't say this nonsense, Princess Xinran. I didn't fall in love with my younger brother. She was just bored and looking for something to do. These royal children had lived a very stable life since childhood, so they wanted to find some excitement. Yuan Xiong patted Xiao Wuji's shoulder and said with a smile, if you are just talking nonsense, you will know in the future. The third brother is someone who has been here before, so he will not be mistaken. Xiao Wuji said, third brother, don't forget, my younger brother is already married, so he won't think about what he has and what he doesn't have. Yuan Xiong frowned and said, I almost forgot about this incident. Okay, the joke ends here. Xiao Wuji stood up and said, I'm going to pack up and set off immediately. Yuan Xiong nodded and said, have a safe trip, be careful in everything. Remember, Princess Xinran must be protected. Xiao Wuji frowned and said, do I have to take her with me? She's just a burden. Now that she's gone, I have to distract myself from protecting her. It's too much trouble. What burden? Xiao Wuji, don't underestimate people. As soon as Xiao Wuji finished speaking, Xia Xinran barged in from the door. Her little face was angry, like a little wildcat with fried hair. Tell me clearly, who is the burden? Xia Xinran rushed in front of Xiao Wuji, with a small face coming towards him, and his teeth were bared, showing two small tiger teeth. Behind him was a uniformed guard commander, who was guarding the gate for Yuan Xiong. At this moment, the commander-in-chief looked helpless. He looked at Xiao Wuji and Yuan Xiong seductively. If it were anyone else, he would have stopped them from breaking in. But for Xia Xinran, the ant, he didn't dare to stop her, and he couldn't stop her. He could only let her break in. Come on. Xiao Wuji turned his head away from Xia Xinran, with a calm expression on his face, as if the person who just said Xia Xinran was a burden was not her at all. You Xia Xinran was furious when she saw Xiao Wuji not saying a word. She had never seen such a shameless person like Xiao Wuji. He was talking bad things about her just now, and yet he was caught red-handed and still kept his composure. Okay, Princess Xinran, you will go with me on this mission. Yuan Xiong looked at Xia Xinran and said with a smile, when you follow Wuji, you must be obedient and don't make your own decisions or act without permission. The real world is very dangerous. If you make any mistake, you may lose your life, so you must be extremely careful. Yuan Xiong said earnestly. Xia Xinran smiled and said, Uncle Yuan, don't worry, I can protect myself. No matter what, I still have Aunt Hua to protect me, so there is no need for him at all. After saying that, Xia Xinran rolled her eyes at Xiao Wuji, her eyes full of disgust. Xiao Wuji clasped his fists at Yuan Xiong and said, Third brother, I have to leave first. After saying that, Xiao Wuji turned and left. Although Xia Xinran was angry, she followed Xiao Wuji closely. If she didn't follow Xiao Wuji, she wouldn't be able to get out of Jinling City. Ding, the host triggers a mission, wipe out the rebels. It is detected that there are still remnants of the rebels from the deposed Yu King. Please ask the host to clear out the remnants of the rebels and kill at least 90% of them. Mission reward, max level astrology. Astrological laws? What's this? Xiao Wuji frowned slightly, and for a moment he didn't remember what kind of martial arts astrology law was. After thinking about it carefully for a while, he finally remembered that astrology law was not a martial arts, but a Taoist art. In other words, it was a divination technique. Even the art of divination has been introduced, which is interesting. Xiao Wuji smiled, didn't take it to heart, and went straight back to Xiao Mansion to say goodbye to Su Wan'er. The two warmed up, and Xiao Wuji quickly rushed back to Bijinfuzi. When he returned to Bijinfuzi, Shui Hua, Song Liman, Xia Xinran and the beautiful woman Hua Yi are already waiting at the door. It is a long way to go to Yuezhu this time, so it is not advisable to bring too many people. Anyway, if you go to Yuezhu, you can go to Huainan Palace to mobilize troops. Let's go. Xiao Wuji got on his horse and left with the four of them. I can finally leave the city. I haven't been to Yuezhu yet. I heard that the people of Yuezhu are tough and have many masters. Is this true? Xia Xinran was riding on the horse, very excited. She kept chattering all the way. Xiao Wuji said expressionlessly, Your Highness, we are going to suppress bandits, not to enjoy the mountains and rivers. You need to understand this. Xia Xinran snorted and said, Of course I know that I am going to suppress the bandits, but haven't I reached Yuezhu yet? Besides, when we get to Yuezhu, if you want to mobilize troops to the Huainan Palace, you have to go through this princess. Without this princess to go with you, it will not be so easy for you to mobilize your troops. Xia Xinran's words are indeed correct. Huainan King Xia Yuanxiang has 200,000 troops to guard the southern border. His men are all brave soldiers who have experienced hundreds of battles, and they only serve the Huainan King. If Xiao Wuji only brought the 13 Jinyi guards, the Taibao order goes to mobilize troops, but King Huainan really may not pay attention to him. King Huainan's army is completely different from the defenders of Hanzhou City. The defenders of Hanzhou City may obey Xiao Wuji's orders, but King Huainan's army does not. You may not take Xiao Wuji seriously. I wonder what the dog emperor thinks. Isn't he afraid of a prince like the king of Huainan who has 200,000 troops guarding the southern border all year round? Since ancient times, few vassal kings who have made great achievements have ended well. Over the years, the army in the south has begun to see situations where they only know the Huainan king but not the emperor. Xiao Wuji knows that no emperor can tolerate such a thing. Although the Huainan king Xia Yuanxiang is the sibling brother of Emperor Jingtai and has always been loyal to him Gang. But as an emperor, Emperor Jingtai would inevitably be suspicious. Once Emperor Jingtai thought that King Huainan was rebelling, even if King Huainan is his brother, Emperor Jingtai will not show mercy. At that time, there will be civil strife between the king and his ministers, and brotherhood will kill each other. The king of Huainan left Xiaoxinran in Jinling city, presumably to reassure Emperor Jingtai. After all, with Xiaoxinran as a hostage, King Huainan will not rebel. The reason why the emperor was willing to let Xiaoxinran go to the south with me this time was probably because he wanted to test King Huainan. Xiao Wuji glanced at Xiaoxinran and thought silently in his heart. If Xiaoxinran went to the Huainan prince's mansion in the south, the king of Huainan kept her on the pretext that he had not seen his daughter for many years and wanted to keep her for a while, and Xiao Wuji did not. Reason to bring him back. By then, the emperor will lose Xiaoxinran as a hostage. In the view of Emperor Jingtai, King Huainan's behavior is undoubtedly preparing for rebellion. As the emperor, he will plan to reduce the vassal. If King Huainan did not keep Xiaoxinran, but still sent her back to Jinling, it would prove that King Huainan had no objection. In this way, the emperor could feel at ease. In short, this mission was not just to suppress bandits and quell rebellion. And it was also an invisible confrontation between Emperor Jingtai and King Huainan. Xiao Wuji wanted to understand this and couldn't help but sigh at Emperor Jingtai's imperial power. Although the dog emperor became more and more stupid as he got older, he still used this imperial power. He was as proficient as he was when he was young. US who is thousands of miles away from Jinling. Even if 537 had to travel day and night, it would still take at least 8 or 9 days to arrive. What's more, Xiao Wuji and his party only traveled during the day, and they all traveled at night. It was time to rest. After traveling for 10 days, Xiao Wuji and his party only walked more than half of the distance. On this day, Xiao Wuji and others found an inn to rest. Have you heard about it? Nangang Yu, the eldest daughter of the Nangang family, is looking for a husband. Ah! Real or fake? Unlikely. That is to say, Nangang Yu is the third most beautiful woman on the Rouge list, and is also the top talent on the Qianlong list. Why does such a person need a son-in-law? I'm afraid that anyone who goes to the Nangang family to propose marriage will break through the threshold of her family. You don't understand, it's because there are so many people going to the Nangang family to propose marriage that the Nangang family wants to find a son-in-law for Nangang Yu, so as not to offend many martial arts comrades. That's it? It seems that it's not good for people who are too good. That is to say, if you marry your daughter to the Li family, you will offend the Wang family, if you marry your daughter to the Wang family, you will offend the Lu family. However, the Nangang family has a profound background and is connected to the royal family. They shouldn't care about offending fellow martial arts, right? From what you said, so what if you have a deep foundation? If you want to survive in the martial arts world, you must be good at dancing and make friends with heroes from all over the world. It's not a wise move to offend someone rashly. Moreover, the Nangang family can take this opportunity to show their face in front of others and make the name of the Nangang family even more famous. Why not? I see. A few people nodded silently, and finally realized. By the way, what are the requirements for the Nangang family to recruit a son-in-law? If I could bring Nangang Yu, this beautiful girl from heaven, into my house, I would be willing to do so even if I was young. What does it mean to live 10 years less? If I could succeed, I would be willing to live 20 years shorter. There is some news from the Nangang family that the recruitment of a son-in-law will be held in Jinling City. All young talents under the age of 30 can participate. Those who participate in recruiting a son-in-law do not need to have a prominent family background. Even if they are born into poverty, they can do so, but they must have real talent and learning. When recruiting a son-in-law for the Nangang family, they must not only have outstanding martial arts skills, but also have good looks, outstanding talents, excellent moral character, etc. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full-level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 292. When recruiting a son-in-law for the Nangong family, they must not only have outstanding martial arts skills, but also have good looks, outstanding talents, excellent moral character, etc. In short, if you want to marry Nangong Yu home, you must be a good person. Ah! If I'm under 30, wouldn't I be able to participate? A warrior scratched his head and said with regret. The companion next to him smiled and said, Old Wang, you have been married for 8 years, and your children can pee and play with mud. You still want to marry Nangong Yu? Are you not crazy? That's right, who is Nangong Yu and how could she be someone else's concubine? You'd better go to sleep, there's everything in your dreams. Let alone Nangong Yu, even Piao Miao Yu is possible. Ha 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 ha. A group of Jianghu warriors gathered together, talking to each other about the recent major events in the Jianghu. The most talked about thing is Nangong Yu's recruitment of a son-in-law. By the window of the inn, 2 tables of guests were sitting. There was a man and a woman at the table, and they were clearly Xiao Wuji and Xia Xinran. There were 2 men and a beautiful woman at the other table, who were Shui Hua, Song Liman and the guard Ant Hua. When Xiao Wuji heard the discussion among the people around him, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Xiao Wuji had heard Nangong Yu's name from Xiao Wuchen. Only now did he understand why Xiao Wuchen traveled thousands of miles from Shenshui Palace to Jinling City. It was because he wanted to marry Nangong Yu. Shenshui Palace is a major martial arts sect, and its information is better than ordinary martial arts warriors. It seems that Xiao Wuchen already knew that Nangong Yu was looking for a son-in-law, so he rushed to Jinling early. It's just that he was killed by Xiao Wuji without even seeing Nangong Yu's face. Alas, do you men have nothing but women? Xia Xinran looked at Xiao Wuji and asked. Xiao Wuji glanced at Xia Xinran and said calmly, this question will wait until the Huainan Palace. You can ask your father and see how he answers you. Xia Xinran rolled her eyes at Xiao Wuji, then turned to look at the warrior next to her who was getting more and more excited as she chatted. A trace of disdain flashed in her eyes. Isn't it just Nangong Yu? What's so great about it? Are these people so crazy? Xiao Wuji raised his glass and drank, and said with a smile, everyone has a love for beauty. It is natural for men to like beautiful women. Just like you women, don't you also like good-looking men? Who said that? Xia Xinran retorted, what's important about a man is what's inside, appearance is not important at all. Real. Xiao Wuji looked at Xia Xinran playfully and smiled coldly. Xia Xinran's face turned red, and she couldn't help but turn away, cursing in her heart, why is this bastard looking at me like this? Don't you know what you look like? Although Xia Xinran said that a man's appearance is not important, she had to admit that Xiao Wuji was very handsome. Not many women could resist Xiao Wuji's face. Even she did not dare to look too much for fear of herself. Fascinated by him, Xia Xinran coughed twice, straightened her face and said, if you want to marry Nangong Yu, it is impossible with these crooked melons and cracked dates. I don't know which unlucky guy will marry Nangong Yu home. Unlucky guy? Where did this begin? Isn't it a great joy to marry Nangong Yu? This is good luck. Xiao Wuji looked puzzled. Xia Xinran sneered, you don't know the inside story at all, of course you don't understand. Xiao Wuji smiled, is it possible that you know? Do you know Nangong Yu? Of course, this princess knows Nangong Yu. We played together when we were children, and together we beat countless dandies in Jinling City. Xia Xinran raised her chin and said. Oh? Were you so brave when you were a child? Tell me more carefully. Xiao Wuji became interested. He was taking a break anyway, just listening to stories to relieve his boredom. Shui Hua and Song Liman at the next table also pricked up their ears and eavesdropped. Xia Xinran took a sip of tea and said, this princess was a child. I won't tell you anything, Let's talk about Nangongyu. Do you know who Nangongyu is? Xiao Wuji said, young lady of the Nangong family, what else is there to say? The Nangong family is famous in the world and has been inherited for more than 300 years. When the Shangguan family was in charge of the world, the Nangong family already existed. Later, the Xia family rebelled, and the Nangong family also rose up and assisted the Xia family to overthrow Shangguan. The rule of one clan established the Great Zhou dynasty. After the establishment of the Great Zhou dynasty, the Taizhu of the Xia clan was rewarded for his merits. He originally wanted to confer a royal title on the Nangong family, which would be hereditary. But the ancestor of the Nangong family refused, and he knew that the court was treacherous and full of murderous intentions. If the Nangong family entered the court, the future consequences would be unpredictable. So he declined the position of king, and also handed over the military power in his hands, retreated bravely, and peacefully became a martial arts family. The ancestor of the Xia family saw that the ancestor of the Nangong family was determined and no longer forced it. Although he did not give him a prince, he gave him an iron coupon of the elixir and 3 gold medals to avoid death. With the iron coupon of the elixir, Nangong, although the family does not have the right to be a king, it does have the name of a king and can enjoy the royal salary. After the death of the ancestor of the Nangong family, he will still be entitled to enjoy the imperial temple and be famous for centuries. As for the 3 death-free gold medals, the Nangong family can be exempted from 3 death sentences. As long as it is not an unforgivable crime such as treason and colluding with the remnants of the demon sect, even if it is a serious crime, it can be pardoned 3 times. In short, among the major martial arts families in the world, the Nangong family can be ranked in the top 3. Xia, looking at Xiao Wuji happily, he said calmly, although the Nangong family is famous, it has also shown signs of decline in recent decades. In order to maintain their power and status, the Nangong family chose to marry into the royal family. Nangongyu actually has another identity, she is the prince's cousin. The prince's cousin? Is it possible that the prince also has a crush on Nangongyu? Xiao Wuji quickly thought of this. That's right. Xia Xinran nodded and said Nangongyu was only 15 years old back then, and she was already tall and slim, with extremely beautiful appearance. When the prince first met Nangongyu, he fell in love at first sight. After returning home, he hinted that the head of the Nangong family wanted to marry Nangongyu. But the prince had already married the princess at that time, even gave birth to his eldest son, and had several wives and concubines. Moreover, the prince was much older than Nangongyu. The head of the Nangong family was unwilling, but he did not dare to refuse the prince. He could only use the excuse that Nangongyu was too young to delay time. After that, the Nangong family sent Nangongyu to Fuxianmen to practice martial arts, and she stayed there for 7 years. In 7 years, Nangongyu never returned to the Nangong family once, and the prince's fiery heart gradually cooled down as time went by. But who would have thought that Tianji Pavilion would reappear in the world some time ago, with all the beauties in the world on the rouge list? Nangongyu's appearance is extraordinary, and she won the top 3 in one fell swoop. After the prince heard the news, his cold heart became warm again. He brought up the old things again and gave several hints to the Nangong family. The Nangong family did not dare to reject the prince directly, and Nangongyu had also reached the age of marriage, so the Nangong family could no longer find excuses to refuse. So Nangongyu came up with the idea of recruiting a son-in-law from all over the world, hoping to find a suitable husband for herself openly. So that's it? After listening to Xia Xinran's explanation, Xiao Wuji realized that there were so many inside stories about Nangongyu's recruitment of a son-in-law. It turned out that this was an old cow eating young grass. If Xiao Wuji remembered correctly, the prince seems to be 30 this year. 8 or 39 years old, almost 40 years old anyway. Nangongyu is 22 years old this year. Compared with women who married earlier, Nangongyu is obviously older. but compared with the prince, she is extremely young. Young. The prince got married early, at the age of 17, and had his eldest son when he was 19. Counting his age, the prince's eldest son is already 20 years old this year, about the same age as Nangong Yu. If the prince really takes Nangong when Yu marries home, what should the prince's eldest son be called? Nangong Yu? Sister or aunt? After all, the prince's eldest son is only 2 years younger than Nangong Yu. No wonder you said that the person who married Nangong Yu was unlucky. It turned out that his rival was the prince. This was really unlucky. Xiao Wuji shook his head, sighing. Who says it's not? Xia. Xinran looked at the enthusiastic warriors around her and sneered. These people thought they could bring the beauty home, but they didn't know that this was a dead end. Even if someone can make it to the end, he must face the prince. Only by surviving the heavy attacks from the prince can one have a happy marriage. In my opinion, it is impossible to find such a person in the entire world. Xiao Wuji smiled and said that's not necessarily the case. There are crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the rivers and lakes, and there are countless strong people. Until the end, don't speak too harshly. Oh? Then tell me, who could possibly do this? Xia. Xinran looked at Xiao Wuji and suddenly frowned. You won't talk about yourself again, will you? Xiao Wuji smiled and said nothing. Xia Xinran's expression froze, she snorted coldly, turned her head and didn't want to talk to Xiao Wuji anymore. Although she wanted to say that Xiao Wuji was bragging and daydreaming. But she had to admit that if this was the case in the great Zhou who can snatch Nangong Yu from the prince's hands, Xiao Wuji has the greatest possibility. Xiao Wuji's age, appearance, and power status are all suitable. The most important thing is that Xiao Wuji is strong enough, and with the imperial guards behind him, he is the emperor's, he is a confidant, and the prince can't do anything to him. The prince is at best a stumbling block for Xiao Wuji. It is impossible to kill Xiao Wuji. Nyohao, what a pity. Even if you want to participate in the recruitment of a son-in-law, it's too late now. By the time you return to Jinling City from Yuezhu, the daylilies will be cold. Xia Xinran said with a sneer. Xiao Wuji looked at Xia Xinran and smiled slightly. Why are you reacting so hard? I didn't say that I was going to participate in the recruitment of a son-in-law. Xia Xinran's tone was stagnant, and she snorted coldly. Why did I react too much? Don't talk nonsense. Okay, I'm full. You can drink it slowly. After saying that, Xia Xinran got up and went back to the room. Xiao Wuji took a sip from the wine glass and smiled without saying a word. In fact, thinking about it, it would be quite exciting to compete with the prince for a woman. The incident at the inn was just a small episode. After Xiao Wuji and others had eaten and drank enough, they set off again. After another 7 days of driving, they finally reached the southern border. Sir, Yuezhu is ahead. Do we want to go directly to the city? Shuehua rode on horseback and pointed forward. Xiao Wuji shook his head. No, let's go to Huainan Prince's mansion first. Now that I have come to the southern border, I naturally have to say hello to the king of Huainan, otherwise wouldn't it be too rude? Then Xiao Wuji looked at Xia Xinran and said, Your Highness, the princess must also want to see King Huainan as soon as possible, right? Xia Xinran's face showed excitement, but she suppressed the excitement in her heart and said lightly, everything is up to you. No matter where you go first, I have no objection. Xiao Wuji smiled and said, well, let's go to the Huainan Prince's Palace Committee first. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 293. Drive. Xiao Wuji swung his riding whip, slapped the horse's butt hard, and galloped wildly. The horse's hooves trampled, Dust flew up, and rolled up yellow sand. Xiao Wuji and his 5 people quickly disappeared on the official road. Yuezhu was already extremely close to the southern border. The border, but the city closest to the border is not Yuezhu City, but Black Eagle City. Because Black Eagle City is built on the border, the place where Black Eagle City is located is the southernmost part of the Zhou dynasty's territory. In fact, when the Shangguan clan was in power, Yuezhu was the southernmost part of the country. Later, the Zhou dynasty was established, and a mutual market was established with Nanliang. The two countries communicated with each other, and a city was established at the junction of the two countries. As time passed, the city grew bigger and bigger, gradually turning into a small town, and then from a small town into a small city. Later, the Great Zhou dynasty went to war with Nanliang, and the Great Zhou dynasty won, and directly included the small cities established in the mutual market into the territory, and the national border line and area was moved to the south. Later, this small city was expanded many times and finally became today's Black Eagle City. King Huainan led his troops to guard the southern border, and the palace was built in Black Eagle City. This also shows that King Huainan the belief of never retreating in a fight to the death. As long as Black Eagle City is not broken, the Nanliang army will never be able to enter the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty. And if Nanliang wants to invade the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty, it must first kill all the Huainan palaces. Because the Huainan king has been in 10 years guarding the southern border for one day allowed the people in the southern border to live a peaceful and happy life. Therefore, King Huainan has a high prestige in the hearts of the people in the southern border. The army and people in the southern border now only know the king of Huainan, but not the emperor. Xiao Wuji heard that from time to time, the Qingliu officials in the court would stand up to impeach the Huainan king for supporting the army and asking the emperor to cut down the vassal and seize power, but Emperor Jingtai refused every time. Emperor Jingtai said that the Huainan king was his brother, and he believed in the Huainan king. But thinking about the real situation, Emperor Jingtai was not as reassured about King Huainan as he said. He was still very afraid of King Huainan. A vassal king with 200,000 soldiers, no matter which dynasty, generation, or emperor he was placed in, were not at ease. Xiao Wuji and his party entered Black Eagle City, asked passers-by about the location of the Huainan prince's mansion, and headed directly towards the prince's mansion. Xiao Wuji did not come here to be an enemy of the Huainan king. In addition, the Huainan king's his daughter was here too, so there was no need to hide his head and tail. Xiao Wuji came to the gate of the palace and saw a magnificent palace standing in the center of the city. There were 2 stone lions in front of the palace, with teeth and claws showing, extremely powerful and ferocious. There were also 2 groups of soldiers in front of the door, standing guard. The soldier's waist is very straight, his left hand is on the handle of the knife, and his right hand is holding a spear. His eyes are staring straight ahead, unmoving, like a towering pine tree. The soldiers all have resolute faces and are not angry. Wei, at first glance, he looks like a veteran who has experienced hundreds of battles. As the saying goes, you can see the whole picture only by looking at a glimpse. Just from the temperament and appearance of the soldiers standing guard in front of the palace, it can be seen that the army of King Huainan must be well-trained and fierce soldiers. And it can be seen from the awe of the soldiers passing by the people that King Huainan's army must be strictly disciplined. Only an army that truly protects the people can gain the support of the people. Xiao Wuji and others got off their horses and walked towards the palace. The queue was at the outside. The 2 soldiers immediately crossed their spears and stopped Xiao Wuji and his party. "Stop, this is the Huainan prince's mansion, no one can get close to it." A soldier shouted coldly, "Get back quickly, otherwise we have the right to kill you here." Xiao Wuji stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, please tell me that Xiao Wuji, the 13th eunuch of the Jinyi guards, wants to see you." While speaking, Xiao Wuji handed over the token of the 13 Taibao. The 13 royal guards of Jinyi Wei. Chbj, the soldier took the token and checked it. After confirming that it was correct, he respectfully replied, Master Kinhu, please wait a moment, and my subordinates will go and report to the prince immediately. Xiao Wuji said, remember to tell the king of Huainan that I am on this trip. He also brought the only daughter of His Royal Highness the King of Huainan, Princess Xinran. What? Princess Xinran? The soldier's expression changed when he heard this, and other soldiers in the queue also looked in the direction of Xiao Wuji. Xia Xinran also took a step forward at this time and took out her jade pendant. The royal jade pendant, with Xia Xinran's on it. There is no doubt about the name and identity. The soldiers from the two groups immediately knelt down on one knee to salute and shouted in unison, I see you, Princess Xinran, and may I wish you peace and prosperity. Xia Xinran nodded slightly and said calmly, everyone, get up. Thank you, Princess. The soldiers stood up, and one of them quickly ran into the palace to report, while the other led Xiao Wuji and others into the palace. Xia Xinran raised her chin and glanced at Xiao Wuji, as if to say, you see, there is no princess like me. You can't even enter the palace. That's true. If it weren't for Xia Xinran, Xiao Wuji and his party would have to wait outside, waiting for King Huainan to summon him. It's impossible to go in directly like now. After entering the palace, Xia Xinran looked left and right, looking here and there, wondering what they were looking for. They were all curious. Xiao Wuji smiled and said, what? Your royal palace? You never came. Xia Xinran lowered her head and said sadly, I have indeed never been here. Xia Xinran was born in Jinling City and has never left Jinling City since she was born. Although this palace is her home, she has never been here once. Everything here is extremely strange to her. The palace, it was very big. Xiao Wuji and others were led by soldiers through the front yard, corridor, and moon gate. As soon as they arrived at the entrance of the main hall of the palace, Xiao Wuji heard a woman's voice. Xinran, where is Xinran? Xiao Wuji followed the voice and saw a graceful and beautiful woman in gorgeous clothes and a gold hairpin running over in a hurry, with red eyes. When Xia Xinran saw the beautiful woman, her eyes were also red, and she immediately called out mother, then rushed over, and the two hugged each other tightly. Obviously, this beautiful woman was Princess Huainan. Princess Huainan covered Xia Xinran's little face, tears flowed out of her eyes, and said, my daughter, my mother really misses you. I haven't seen you in so many years. How are you? Immediately, I looked around Xia Xinran with red eyes, fearing that something was wrong with Xia Xinran. Xia Xinran just cried and said, don't worry, mother, everything is fine with my daughter. The mother and daughter hugged each other and reminisced about the past. Xiao Wuji looked behind Princess Huainan, where there was a burly man walking slowly. The man looked about 40 years old, wearing a four-clawed python robe, following her step by step, with thick eyebrows. He had eyes, a high nose and a wide mouth, and a square-shaped face with a rather weathered look. When he looked around, his eyes were sharp and powerful, and the aura of a superior person came to his face. Xiao Wuji knew that this person was Xia Yuanxiang, the king of Huainan. Although Xia Yuanxiang looks only about 40 years old on the outside, in fact he is already over 50 years old. Because Xia Yuanxiang has profound inner strength, he maintains his appearance very well. Okay. In fact, Emperor Jingtai is only 7 years older than Xia Yuanxiang, but Emperor Jingtai looks much older than Xia Yuanxiang. Okay, how is it appropriate to cry in front of outsiders? Xia Yuanxiang walked to the princess and Xia Xinran, coughed twice and said, it's all your fault. Princess Huainan hit King Huainan and scolded, if you weren't so cruel and kept Xinran in Jinling City, I wouldn't have been unable to see my daughter for many years. Look at her, she has lost weight and has no fat on her body. She has suffered so many grievances over the years. As she spoke, Princess Huainan's eyes turned red again, and tears were about to fall again. Xia Xinran quickly comforted her, "Don't worry, mother, my daughter is fine and she has not been wronged." King Huainan said helplessly, "I will happily stay in Jinling City. It is for her good and to protect her. Is it possible that you want Xinran to go to the battlefield like her eldest and second brother? You dare?" When she heard that she was going to the battlefield, the princess became furious like a cat whose tail was stepped on, and cursed, "If you dare to let my daughter go to the battlefield, I will never spare you." After saying that, she took Xia Xinran and left. "Come on, Xinran, go back to the house with your mother, and let her take a good look at you." Watching the two people leaving, King Huainan covered his forehead with a look of helplessness. The majestic aura just now disappeared instantly. Even Xiao Wuji did not expect that this King Huainan turned out to be a prince who was afraid of his wife. At this time, King Huainan finally paid attention. When Xiao Wuji and others stood aside, they pretended to cough a few times, straightened their backs, and said calmly, "Are you the 13th Taibao of Jin Yiwei, Xiao Wuji?" Xiao Wuji cupped his fists and saluted, and said neither humble nor arrogantly, "Xiao Wuji, the 13th Taibao of the Jinyi Guards, has met the King of Huainan." Shui, Hua and Song Liman behind him also saluted respectfully. King Huainan glanced at Xiao Wuji and said calmly, "Everyone, please get up. There is no need to be more polite." While he was talking, King Huainan walked towards the main hall, followed closely by Xiao Wuji and the others. King Huainan sat down at the main seat and said, "Everyone, sit down, don't be so formal." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Xiao Wuji said and sat down on the guest chair. Shui Hua and Song Liman stood behind Xiao Wuji. Xiao Wuji could sit, but they didn't dare to sit. King Huainan looked at Xiao Wuji and said, "Your name is my king. I have heard it for a long time. I heard that you are the number one genius of the great Zhou dynasty, which is the title of the emperor's brother." Xiao Wuji's face remained unchanged and he said calmly, "I am ashamed to be called the number one genius in the great Zhou dynasty. It is His Majesty the Emperor who praised me unreasonably." The King of Huainan laughed and said, "If it is, it is, if it is not, it is not. What is there to praise or not to praise? Just tell me, are you the Xiao Wuji mentioned in the rumors?" Xiao Wuji nodded and said, "Yes." The King of Huainan nodded with satisfaction, "That's right, since it's you, what's there to be modest about? In my opinion, pretending to be humble is hypocrisy. You are a military commander, so don't be like those civil servants in the court who talk about benevolence, justice, and morality. In fact, each one is more hypocritical than the other." There was a sense of resentment in these words. It was obvious that King Huainan had long been dissatisfied with the impeachment of the civil servants in the court. This also proved that King Huainan also had spies in Jinling. Otherwise, how would he know the situation in Jinling city? Xiao Wuji was filled with confusion. He was stunned. He didn't know whether King Huainan was testing him or trying to scare him. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty is right. I'll keep it in mind." The King of Huainan nodded, took a sip of tea from the cup, and said, "Okay, we're done with the gossip, it's time to talk about business. You traveled thousands of miles from Jinling to the southern border. You must have a mission, right? Tell me, if you need any help from me, just ask. Seeing that you have safely delivered Xinran to the palace, I can promise you anything." Xiao Wuji said, "Prince Haihan, then I will get straight to the point. Jin Yiwei found out that there was a group of bandits entrenched in Yuezhu, and the official came here to suppress the bandits. But Xiaoguan's side is short of manpower, so I want to borrow troops from the prince to suppress the bandits. I hope the prince can agree. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full-level magic system." Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 294. Borrowing troops. King Huainan touched his chin and asked, "How many people do you want?" Xiao Wuji said, 3,000 people are enough. The king of Huainan asked again, "How many bandits are there?" Xiao Wuji said, "According to the clues obtained so far, there are at least 10,000 bandits." The king of Huainan smiled and said, "There are 10,000 bandits, but you only borrow 3,000 soldiers and horses. Is that enough? This is 3 times the strength difference." Xiao Wuji said calmly, "The army under the prince is well trained, and all of them are warriors who have experienced hundreds of battles. 3,000 men are more than enough." Ha 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 ha. The king of Huainan stroked his beard and laughed. The laughter was loud and spread throughout the main hall of the palace. I don't know if it was because Xiao Wuji said that he was happy that he had done well in training, or for other reasons. Xiao Wuji, you are really confident. Fighting 3 times as many enemies with 3,000 soldiers and horses is something not everyone dares to do. The way you look now, you look a bit like the first genius in Zhou dynasty. The king of Huainan stood up and said, "Since it is the imperial court that wants to suppress bandits, I will naturally do whatever I can to suppress them. But whether the army under my king is willing to fight with you depends on your ability. You should know that the army is different from the imperial guards. If you want the soldiers to fight to the death, you must convince them. Let's go, I will take you to the military camp." The king of Huainan walked out of the main hall with his hands behind his back, and Xiao Wuji followed closely behind. As soon as he walked out of the hall, Xiao Xinran hurried over and shouted, "Father, I want to go too." King Huainan frowned and shouted coldly, "The place we are going to is a military camp. There are a group of big men there. What are you doing there as a girl? You should stay in the palace with your mother. Your mother has not seen you for many years and misses you so much that she almost goes crazy." Xiao Xinran hugged King Huainan's arm and said coquettishly, "Father, just let me go. My daughter has never been to a military camp since she was a child. As the daughter of the king of Huainan, but she doesn't know what the military camp looks like, why won't she be laughed out of her head if she tells it? Father, your face will not look good at that time." The king of Huainan wanted to refuse, but when he saw Xiao Xinran's coquettish appearance, he couldn't say no. Like Princess Huainan, the king of Huainan actually missed Xiao Xinran very much. But he was a big man and could not be like him. She was crying like a princess. Now that Xiao Xinran had a request, he naturally had to comply with her. "Okay, father will take you there. But you have to be obedient and don't cause trouble when you get to the military camp." "Okay, my daughter will definitely not cause trouble." Xiao Xinran happily hugged King Huainan's arm and said. Soon, Xiao Wuji and his party arrived at the military camp. King Huainan had 200,000 troops. There were 2 large camps on the left and right in Black Eagle City, each stationed with 100,000 soldiers and horses. King Huainan brought Xiao Wuji to the Zhou camp. The military camp was densely covered with flags, fluttering in the wind. Xiao Wuji followed King Huainan into the military camp. When all the soldiers along the way saw King Huainan, they all saluted respectfully. There was a post every 5 steps, and a sentry every 10 steps. There are also groups of soldiers patrolling various parts of the military camp, and the guards are very tight. Even if a fly flies in, it will be discovered by the soldiers in the military camp. Loud shouts passed into Xiao Wuji's ears, and Xiao Wuji's mind automatically appeared a group of soldiers training. Although he did not see real people, Xiao Wuji could imagine the faces of the army soldiers just by listening to the shouts. This king of Huainan is worthy of being the king of the south and the southern barrier of the Zhou dynasty. He has such a tiger and wolf under his command. Master, it's no wonder that Nanliang has been unable to step into the southern border for many years. Soon, Xiao Wuji followed King Huainan to the military camp training ground. Xiao Wuji took a look and saw that it was so dark that he could hardly see the head. They were all phalanxes of soldiers. At the front is a phalanx of pikemen. Each soldier holds a spear and is practicing thrusting. Their movements are uniform, as if carved from the same mold. Even though they only have one move, it is extremely powerful. This is the only thrust that the spearmen have practiced for many years, and all their skills are in this thrust. After years of hard training, the angle and strength of their thrusts have long been perfected. On the battlefield, the two armies faced off, and the spearmen faced off against each other. With one stab, they can pierce through the enemy soldiers and their armors. Those with strong strength can even pierce several enemy soldiers in a row. They also have great strength to retract their guns. After killing one person, they can quickly retract their guns to assassinate the second people. The second square formation is the infantry square formation, also called wolf soldiers. The soldiers each hold a shield in their left hand and a sword in their right hand, practicing the martial arts of the Zhou army. First they practice alone, and then they work in pairs recruit for battle. In addition, there are archers, shield soldiers, and heavy armored cavalry. Each unit can fight independently and cooperate with each other tacitly. The roars and shouts are like thunder in the military camp. There was an explosion, and the sound shook the sky. A hint of arrogance appeared on King Huainen's face, and he asked, "How is my Black Eagle army?" Xiao Wuji said, "The prince's army is brave, and it is truly well deserved." Xiao Wuji's words were not flattery, but the truth. The most elite army of the Zhou dynasty before was undoubtedly the Forbidden Army that guarded the palace. But Xiao Wuji saw the Black Eagle army under the command of King Huainan today, and felt that the Black Eagle army even worse than the Forbidden Army. King Huainan walked to the high platform, and two soldiers immediately beat the drums to gather together. The drums roared, and all the soldiers stopped their drills and lined up to assemble. In the army, the sound of drums is an order. The Black Hawk army organized the army very quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was already assembled. "See the prince! See the prince! See the prince!" The soldiers roared in unison, and the roar formed an overwhelming sound wave that made people's eardrums vibrate. Facing such a tiger and wolf army, a timid and cowardly person might not even be able to breathe. The iron-blooded murderous aura that rushed towards his face, until it's scary. King Huainan turned his head and glanced at Xiao Wuji, and found that Xiao Wuji was expressionless and calm, and he was a little surprised. He originally thought that Xiao Wuji was young and frivolous. "I have never seen such an iron-blooded army, and I will definitely feel comfortable. But I don't expect Xiao Wuji to be indifferent," and his face does not change. Not everyone can have this kind of energy-raising skills and mentality and will. It happened twice. King Huainan laughed secretly in his heart, then took a step forward and shouted coldly, "Quiet!" The army suddenly fell into a dead silence, and the drop of a needle could be heard. King Huainan faced the army and shouted, "The imperial court has a decree to send Xiao Wuji, 1,000 households of Jinyi guards, to Yuezhu to suppress bandits. I need to send 3,000 troops. Who is willing? Follow Xiaoqianhu to Yuezhu." In fact, King Huainan only needs to say a word to send out 3,000 soldiers and horses. But he wanted to see how much the famous Xiao Wuji weighed. Tens of thousands of troops looked at Xiao Wuji beside King Huainan at the same time. Although he said nothing, but the eyes of tens of thousands of people were like tens of thousands of sharp knives. Even a master would feel fear when faced with the direct gaze of tens of thousands of iron-blooded troops. Xiao Wuji took a step forward and said calmly, "Those who are willing to go with me to suppress the bandits should come forward." The tens of thousands of troops said nothing, and the atmosphere was a bit awkward. At this moment, a general at the front of the army stepped forward. He looked about 30 years old. The general shouted to Xiao Wuji, "Xiaoqianhu, if you want to, brothers, I will go with you to suppress the bandits. You can't just talk in vain. Since it is the decree of the imperial court, we will naturally go to suppress the bandits, but if Xiaoqianhu is incapable, we will go to suppress the bandits ourselves, and there is no need for Xiaoqianhu to do it for him." The meaning of this is obvious, that is, The Black Hawk Army does not want to be led by an incompetent person. They are confident that they can complete the bandit suppression, but they do not want to use their lives and achievements to add to the resume of an incompetent person. Do you think of me as gold-plated? Xiao Wuji shook his head and laughed. There are indeed young men in the noble families of the imperial court who often use the opportunity to suppress bandits to get gold. After success, they can be promoted. Xiao Wuji never thought that one day he would be regarded as a playboy. What do you want? Xiao Wuji looked at the army and asked. The general said it's very simple. Xiaoqian who only needs to show his hands. Let's do this. I will be Xiaoqian who's opponent. As long as Xiaoqian who defeats me, I will take my 3,000 soldiers and horses and follow Xiaoqian who to US Hu. Xiao Wuji glanced at King Huainan next to him. He was stroking his beard and smiling. He had no intention of interfering at all. He was just watching the show. Xiao Wuji shook his head and said, "Swords have no eyes. If I hurt the general, I won't." All right. Let's do this. I only use one sword. As long as the generals present can imitate what I did, I will voluntarily admit defeat and never mention borrowing troops again. How about that? The general frowned slightly when he saw that he had been underestimated. He was a little dissatisfied. The tens of thousands of soldiers behind him were also dissatisfied. Their Black Hawk army had never been so underestimated. The young general said solemnly that general just waiting to see Xiaoqian Hu's strength. Xiao Wuji smiled, took a step forward, looked around, and finally stopped at a hill behind the military camp. The military camp was built on the mountain. The height of the hill was about 300 to 400 meters, and the width was even smaller, like a rope. The huge stalagmite stood still. Xiao Wuji slowly pulled out the snow-drinking sword, and the cold sword energy suddenly burst out from Xiao Wuji's body and swept in all directions. In the blink of an eye, a layer of frost had condensed on the ground under Xiao Wuji's feet. Clang! The sword suddenly sounded, and Xiao Wuji soared into the sky, instantly jumping into the air. Endless sword light bloomed, converging into one, forming a huge sword energy of 60 or 70 meters long, and suddenly fell down. Cold blade and ice heart. The strongest killing move of Aohan's 6 techniques, the cold blade and ice heart suddenly exploded. The sword light fell and struck the hill hard. There was a crisp sound, like tofu being cut, and the hill was instantly split into two by the sword light. Tightly. Then the earth shook and the mountains shook, and roars came one after another, like an earth dragon turning over. Tens of thousands of troops stared blankly at the hill in front of them, only to see that the hill had been split in two from the middle, split into two halves like a gourd. The cut was as smooth as mirror, the frost began to spread at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a blink of an eye, the two hills were completely frozen by the frost. The cold air broke out, causing tens of thousands of soldiers to shiver involuntarily. There was a clang of a knife, and Xiao Wuji sheathed his sword and slowly landed on the ground. The sword intention on his body gradually dissipated and calm returned. However, the hearts of tens of thousands of troops could not calm down for a long time. They looked at the frozen hill that was split in half and could not recover for a long time. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, who would have believed that someone could split a mountain in half with one knife? There was no smile on the face of Huainan King Xia Yuanxiang. There was only solemnity on his face. His fists were clenched together unconsciously, and his knuckles turned white. What a strong knife, what a strong person. Is this Xiao Wuji? It really lives up to its reputation. The king of Huainan was completely impressed by Xiao Wuji in his heart. Even he might not be able to handle such a sharp sword technique. If it were a head-on fight, he would never be Xiao Wuji's opponent. Martial Arts, become invincible starting from the full-level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 295. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he really couldn't believe that Xiao Wuji could possess such strength at such an age. Xia Xinran, who was next to King Huainan, was dumbfounded at this moment. Although she had long known that Xiao Wuji was very strong, she had no idea how strong he was. Now that I am watching Xiao Wuji cut through the mountain with his sword, I know how strong Xiao Wuji really is. I never expected that this bad guy could be so powerful. Xiao Wuji turned around and looked at the tens of thousands of troops, and raised his voice. How is my strength? Are any of the generals willing to give it a try? As long as any general can imitate me and do it again, I will admit defeat and walk away without saying a word, never mentioning the borrowing of troops. The tens of thousands of troops were in dead silence, and no one dared to make a sound anymore. At this moment, the tens of thousands of soldiers looked at Xiao Wuji with nothing but awe or awe, and there was no hint of contempt. As for the generals, they even smiled bitterly. Imitate Xiao Wuji, do it again? How is it possible? Xiao Wuji's sword would have been impossible to strike without the cultivation of the middle stage of the Grand Master. The power has even reached the late stage of the Grand Master. And only the Grand Master of Sword Dao or the Grand Master of Sword Dao can have such lethality. It is impossible for an ordinary Grand Master to be on par with Xiao Wuji. With such strength, even if all the generals come together, they will not be able to catch Xiao Wuji's sword. The general who wanted to compete with Xiao Wuji before even said 7 or 8-0 looked ashamed. He was still unconvinced before, thinking that Xiao Wuji did not dare to compete with him. Now he realized that he was not qualified to compete with Xiao Wuji at all. The young general looked at Xiao Wuji, cupped his fists and said Xiao Qianhu's strength. Gao Qiang finally convinced Zhao Changkong and was willing to follow Xiao Qianhu to Yuezhu to suppress bandits. The last general, Wang Heba, is also willing. Count me, Su Longxiang. I am coming too. Me too. Please order Xiao Qianhu. The generals roared one by one, and tens of thousands of troops also roared. The rules in the military camp are very simple: the weak obey the strong. Xiao Wuji is very powerful, so they are naturally convinced. Following a person like Xiao Wuji, they will definitely be able to establish credit. Your Majesty, how are you? Xiao Wuji looked at King Huainan and asked. King Huainan nodded. Since my army is willing to go, please ask Xiao Qianhu to order troops. However, I still want to ask one more question: is 3,000 soldiers and horses really enough? Xiao Wuji smiled and said, 3,000 troops are more than enough. After saying that, Xiao Wuji looked in the direction of Zhao Changkong and said loudly, I only need 3,000 soldiers and horses, so General Zhao can go with me. Yes, the last General Zhao Changkong took the order. Zhao Changkong looked happy and responded loudly with clasped fists. The 3,000 soldiers in Zhao Changkong's headquarters also looked happy. After spending all day training in the military camp, they were almost bored with idleness. They had long wanted to fight with real swords and guns. It's a pity that Nanliang has been too peaceful in recent years and dare not raise troops to attack. Even if they want to fight, they can't find a chance. Now following Xiao Wuji, they can finally kill happily. With these three compared with the thousands of troops, the other soldiers looked depressed. They also wanted to go into battle to kill the enemy, but it was a pity that Xiao Wuji did not choose them. Several other generals were also depressed and secretly regretted why they did not jump out and say that they wanted to fight with Xiao Wuji just now. Competition. If they had shown their faces just now, the task of suppressing bandits would now fall on them. Xiao Wuji walked up to King Huainan, cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, the men and horses have been selected. I have decided to set off in an hour. May I ask if you have any other advice? The king of Huainan glanced at Zhao Changkong's 3,000 soldiers and horses, and said solemnly, Bring them back alive as much as possible. On the battlefield, swords without eyes are meant to kill people. The Black Eagle army was trained by the king of Huainan, and he naturally did not want to see them die. but suppressing bandits is a matter of protecting the homeland, the country, and the people. As a soldier, it is my duty to do so. Xiao Wuji clasped his fists and said, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, I will do my best to keep them safe." After saying that, Xiao Wuji looked at Zhao Changkong and said loudly, "General Zhao, I will give you 1 hour to prepare. We will set off for Yuezhu in 1 hour. The general will obey." Zhao Changkong took the order and led 3,000 troops from his headquarters to leave the army formation to prepare. When the army goes on an expedition, it is naturally impossible to bring only people. Weapons, horses, and food and grass must be fully prepared. However, these are already made in the military camp. 1 hour was more than enough preparation time. Soon, the 3,000 troops were ready to go. Xiao Wuji got on his horse, and Shuihua and Song Liman also got on their horses. Xia Xinran also wanted to follow, but was pulled back by the king of Huainan. "Father, what are you doing?" Xia Xinran wanted to shake off King Huainan's hand, but found that she couldn't shake it off at all. "What do you want to do?" The king of Huainan shouted coldly. "Suppressing bandits is a man's business, why are you joining in the fun?" Xia Xinran said, "But this time I came to Yuezhu with Xiao Wuji to suppress bandits. How could I not go?" The king of Huainan said angrily, "It is enough for more than 3,000 grown men to go. What are you going to do as a woman? Holding back. Just stay here and don't go anywhere. My father can agree to whatever you want, but this thing is absolutely impossible. How could the king of Huainan let his daughter go to suppress bandits? The sword has no eyes, but it can kill people. He doesn't want his beautiful daughter to come back with only a corpse. No, maybe not even the whole body. Set off." Xiao Wuji shouted and left with 3,000 troops. Xia Xinran shouted Xiao Wuji's name from behind, but Xiao Wuji turned a deaf ear and never looked back. The reason why Yuan Xiong asked Xia Xinran to follow him to Yuezhu was because the purpose is to borrow troops from the Huainan palace and test the Huainan king at the same time. Now that the army has been mobilized, Xiao Wuji will of course want to keep Xia Xinran, the sluggish one. When it comes to the battlefield, how can Xiao Wuji have the spare time to take care of a sluggish person? Oil bottle? Drive. Xiao Wuji rode on horseback, followed closely by 3,000 troops. The horses' hooves trampled on them, raising up rolling yellow sand, and soon disappeared on the official road. Xia Xinran was dumbfounded, and her face turned red with anger. She thought that this time being able to follow Xiao Wuji to suppress the bandits, I didn't expect that in the end I would have to sit at home and wait. Black Eagle City is very close to Yuezhu City, and the army rushed at full speed, but it only took half a day to arrive. Xiao Wuji did not lead the army into the city, but let the army rested outside the city. "Dare I ask Xiao Qinhu, where are the bandits?" Zhao Changkong walked to Xiao Wuji and asked. Xiao Wuji said, "Wait a little longer, the news will come soon." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the sun setting on the horizon, and a falcon eagle pierced the sky and flew towards Xiao Wuji. Xiao Wuji blew his whistle, and the falcon eagle descended from the sky, slowly. It slowly fell on Xiao Wuji's arm. Xiao Wuji took off the small piece of paper from the talons of the falcon eagle. When he raised his hand, the falcon eagle spread its wings and flew into the sky, and soon disappeared. There were bandits entrenched in Yuezhu, and the Jinyaiwei had already investigated when we arrived. We sent spies to keep a close eye on us. What the hawk sent us was the location where the bandits were entrenched. Wuxia Mountain. Map. Xiao Wuji shouted, and Shuihua immediately sent over the map of Yuezhu. Xiao Wuji searched for a while on the map, and soon found the location of Wuxia Mountain. "It's here." Xiao Wuji pointed to Wuxia Mountain on the map and said. Zhao Changkong looked at the map, frowned slightly, and said, "The location chosen by this group of bandits is very good. Wuxia Mountain is easy to defend but difficult to attack. There are steep slopes and cliffs on three sides. There is only one way in and out. If we attack from the front, we will definitely fall into their ambush. Sir, do you want to send a vanguard team to explore the road? After the traps are clearly detected, it won't be too late for the army to attack and kill them. Xiao Wuji shook his head and said, no need, just go straight up. I am clearing the way ahead. No matter how many traps there are, I will not be afraid. I ordered you to go down and let the army rest for the night. Tomorrow, I will follow my officer to suppress the bandits and kill the thieves. Zhao Changkong wanted to say something else, but seeing that Xiao Wuji had already made up his mind, he did not dare to say more. Logically speaking, if you know that the enemy occupies a favorable location and set up an ambush, you should destroy the trap before attacking. Or surround the mountain to cut off the enemy. Without enough food, grass, and water, the enemy would be able to defeat itself without attack. Xiao Wuji led his men to fight head-on, which was not in line with the way of using troops. But when Zhao Changkong thought of Xiao Wuji's strength, his uneasiness eased a bit. If Xiao Wuji really could, leading people into Wuxia mountain can indeed save a lot of effort. In fact, Xiao Wuji didn't think that much. He just felt that his strength was enough, and he didn't need to use any tactics or tricks at all. He just used force to defeat the law. Simple and direct. There was nothing to say all night, and the next day came in a blink of an eye. After some rest, the 3,000 soldiers recovered their physical strength, and their mental strength had returned to its peak. Xiao Wuji gave an order, and the 3,000 troops immediately marched towards Wuxia mountain. Soon, Xiao Wuji came to the foot of Wuxia mountain. In fact, Xiao Wuji was already very experienced in leading troops to suppress bandits. The previous bloodbath of the Evil Blood sect and the invasion of the base of the Destiny sect were very similar to today's situation. Go into the mountains. Xiao Wuji gave the order and immediately rushed into the Wuxia mountain. The 3,000 troops behind him followed closely and treated him with caution. The Wuxia mountain is very big, let alone 3,000 people. Even if 30,000 people descend, there is not a single person in sight. Moreover, tens of thousands of bandits are entrenched here and have already carved out a mountain road. Xiao Wuji and his party only need to rush forward along the mountain road. Shoot the arrow. Suddenly there was a roar from the mountain, followed by 5.4 densely packed feather arrows coming from both sides of the mountain road. The arrow clusters of the feather arrows flashed with cold light, seducing people's hearts, and the arrows killed people. Zhao Changkong's body experience after 100 battles, when he saw the feather arrow coming, he immediately roared, "Raise your shield!" The shield soldiers were already ready. When they heard the order, they quickly raised their shields to defend themselves and protected all the soldiers under the shields. However, Xiao Wuji was faster than them. The moment the feather arrow was shot, Xiao Wuji had already flown into the air. Xiao Wuji was flying into the air. Wuji used his power in the palm of his hand, and powerful real energy wrapped around him, whizzing out, stopping all the arrows in mid-air. Xiao Wuji saw clearly the specifications of the arrows, and they were all imperial weapons. Obviously, these people the ordnance used came from the hands of the deposed king of Yu. The world has shifted greatly. Xiao Wuji roared angrily, and controlled the feather arrows to shoot back. The speed increased several times. Whoosh! 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 The sound of piercing the wind sounded, and all the feather arrows were shot into the dense forests on both sides of the mountain road. A series of bursts suddenly sounded in the dense forest. There were painful wails and screams, and the bandits hiding among them jumped up suddenly after being hit by arrows, revealing their bodies. The next second, they were pierced by thousands of arrows and died. In just a blink of an eye, in a short time, the bandits who were ambushing in the dense forest on both sides suffered heavy casualties. Corpses rolled down one after another, and each one turned into a hedgehog. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full level magic system. Author, drunk in March at Westlake. Chapter 296. When Zhao Changkong and the 3,000 soldiers saw Xiao Wuji displaying his power, they all roared to cheer Xiao Wuji up. Master Xiao is mighty. They never thought that the battle could be fought like this. They were already waiting to defend themselves against the arrow attacks, but they didn't expect that none of the arrows fell. Instead, they killed many bandits. Fortunately, the remaining bandits attacked from both sides. They were killed in the dense forest on the mountain road, and the shouts of killing were heard one after another. Zhao Changkong quickly ordered the soldiers to attack. Brothers, kill these bandits and let them see the strength of the Black Eagle Army. Kill! 3,000 Black Eagle Army soldiers roared in unison, and at the same time they formed a formation to meet the enemy. There was a circle of shield soldiers on the outermost periphery, with spearmen behind them, and then archers. The archers fired thousands of arrows at once, hitting the bandits who were charging one after another. Shoot them to death. The bandits running at the front fell in pieces, like cutting wheat. Xiao Wuji stabbed into the bandits with a knife. Between the sword's light, the stumps and broken arms flew, blood spattered, and screams. Continuously. With just a wave of the knife, more than a dozen heads rose into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the bandits who were ambushing here were killed. Xiaoqian, who is so strong. It's so terrifyingly strong. He doesn't show mercy at all when he kills people. This killing method is more ruthless than ours. Many soldiers couldn't help but feel chilled when they saw the stumps and broken arms at Xiao Wuji's feet. Just because none of those who died under Xiao Wuji's sword had a complete body. This time the suppression of bandits may be easier than I thought. At this moment, Zhao Kongkong's uneasiness all dissipated. With a brave man like Xiao Wuji taking the lead, what bandits can stop them? This is simply a waste of effort. 28. Keep moving forward, no bandits here will be spared, and they will be killed without mercy. Xiao Wuji sheathed his sword and ordered in a cold voice. Yes. The soldiers roared in response, and everyone rushed on their way faster. After a hearty fight, the army's eyes were red, and their blood was boiling. With the momentum of victory, they now feel that they are invincible. Kill! The army rushed forward, rushing along the mountain road to the top of the Wuxia mountain. There were several ambushes along the way, but Xiao Wuji led his men to break them all. In the camp on the Wuxia mountain, many bandit leaders already knew that the imperial army had arrived. Master, what should we do? The imperial army has come to kill. Look, the flag is the Black Hawk Army of Black Hawk City. The combat power is so powerful that the brothers can hardly stand it anymore. The person leading the troops is a Jinyi Weiqianhu. He is so strong that he seems to be a powerful master. He almost killed all the brothers. Hurry up and find a way to break out, otherwise we will all die here today. Yes, master, please quickly find a way to break out. Several village leaders were noisy and roared at a bald man with a scarred face. The bald man touched his bald head, a stern look flashed in his eyes, and he shouted coldly, "Send people to set fire to the mountain to hide people's ears. I will lead my brothers from go down the mountain on the west trail." Okay, everyone listens to the boss. Let the brothers set fire to the mountain and break out immediately. Damn the Black Eagle Army, let them be reduced to ashes along with Wuxia Mountain. On the surface, there is only one way up the mountain in Wuxia Mountain, but they have been here for so long, how can they not leave themselves a way out? The bandits have long built an escape road, which they are prepared to use at such critical moments. Just when everyone made up their minds to escape, a group of people broke into the lobby of the cottage from the outside. The leader was a middle-aged man with a gloomy face. His lips were as sharp as a knife, his eyes were narrow, and his eyes were as cold as poisonous snakes, which was intimidating. Seeing the middle-aged man leading someone in, the boss and many bandit leaders suddenly changed their expressions. "Mr. Wen, what do you mean?" The eldest master looked at the middle-aged man and asked. Mr. Wen said coldly, "The eldest master, the prince spends money to support you because he wants you to serve, not to be a coward who is greedy for life and afraid of death. At this moment, the enemy is facing you. You don't want to resist, but you want to escape. What crime should you do?" The headmaster's face was gloomy. Before he could speak, he heard a little boss yelling, "The prince is already dead, who cares now?" Puff. Before he finished speaking, Mr. Wen slashed with his sword. A sword light flashed away, and the head of the bandit leader flew up. Seeing Mr. Wen killing people without saying a word, many of the gangsters were frightened and backed away. Even the headmaster broke out in a cold sweat. Mr. Wen shook off the blood on his sword, looked around at everyone, and said coldly, "No matter whether the prince is dead or alive, you are all the dogs raised by the prince. Since it is a dog, it must be obedient. No matter when the time comes, it will never be the dog's turn to become the master. I have received news that the Kinhu of Jinyaiwei who came with the troops this time is Xiao Wuji who killed the prince. This is our chance to avenge the prince. No one can leave today. Everyone rush forward and kill Xiao Wuji to avenge the prince." Mr. Wen's eyes were red and his face was distorted. He looked crazy, like a lunatic. Except for him, everyone he brought was like this. They were all dead soldiers of the deposed king of Yu, and they were loyal to the deposed king of Yu. Even if the deposed king of Yu was deposed, Mr. Wen's eyes were red. Even after they died, they were still carrying out the orders left by the deposed king of Yu to the letter. They never wanted to avenge the deposed Yu king. Now that their enemy Xiao Wuji came to their door, they were determined to fight Xiao Wuji to the death, even if they died together. No matter what, the bandits in the village don't think so. They are not the dead soldiers of the deposed Yu king, they only took refuge in the deposed Yu king because of their interests. Now that the deposed Yu king is dead, who is willing to fight for a dead man? Mr. Wen, Xiao Wuji is a powerful grandmaster. How can we be his opponent? The speaker was a white-faced scholar. He was the second in command of the bandits and also a military advisor. Mr. Wen gave the white-faced scholar a cold look and said calmly, "I don't care so much. Either you go to meet the enemy now, or you will die here now. There are two roads, choose one." The sword in Mr. Wen's hand was still bleeding, and many bandit leaders were afraid and did not dare to step forward. The strongest among the bandits were only a few innate warriors, and Mr. Wen was the confidant of the deposed Yu king. He is a true master. Not to mention that Mr. Wen has helpers behind him, all of them are innate warriors. Even if they go together, they are no match for these people. "Mr. Wen, please calm down. Mr. Wen, please calm down. We will go immediately." The leader had no choice but to beg for mercy and led a group of bandits to meet the enemy. After they left, a dead man came behind Mr. Wen and said, "Sir, these bandits are greedy for life and afraid of death. I'm afraid it goes against our will." Mr. Wen said calmly, "It doesn't matter. I just sent people to destroy the escape route. When the escape route is destroyed, they will have to go up if they don't want to." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a loud boom. The loud noise was like the anger of the god of thunder, and the sound shook for miles. Mr. Wen sneered and said, "It seems that they have succeeded. As a result, no one can leave Wuxia mountain alive." The subordinate said respectfully, "Your Excellency is wise." Mr. Wen said coldly, "There is no way out in this battle. Either Xiao Wuji dies or we die. Everyone, we have all been deeply gracious to His Highness the King of Yu, and we can only repay it by dying. Let us kill Xiao Wuji today and avenge His Highness the King of Yu." Revenge. Many people roared in unison, and then everyone rushed out of the lobby of the cottage. The boss of the cottage and a group of small leaders were still trying to find an opportunity to sneak away quietly, but they heard their men coming to report that the mountain road to the west had been blown up. Now, they have no way to escape. Now, all the bandits are panicking. Master, what should I do now? That bastard named Wen wants to drag us to death together. Yes, he wanted to be buried with the dead prince, but we don't want to. This bastard actually cut off our retreat. It was so insidious. The headmaster's face was ferocious, so gloomy that he could shed tears, and he said with hatred, now that things have happened, we have no other way to go. We can only fight hard. Brothers, whether you live or die depends on your ability. No matter what, there are many of us, so we still have a chance to rush out. That's all it can do. Kill all those officers and soldiers. I can't do that. I have more than 10,000 troops, but I can't kill 3,000 of them. Seeing that there is no way to escape, all the ferocity in the bandits' bones burst out at this moment. When people are cornered, they will fight back desperately. This is also the reason why in the art of war, it is said to surround 3 without 1 to prevent the enemy from counter-attacking before death. Kill them. Leave no one behind. The army rushed into the mountain stronghold, and bandits poured out from all directions to fight with the bandits. The shouts of killing were intertwined, and there was blood everywhere. Broken limbs and broken arms were flying everywhere, and screams were heard one after another. Xiaowaji, one person cuts a bloody path, one after another, the sword chi passes through, harvesting the lives of the undead. Although he killed no less than 1,000 people, Xiaowaji's whole body is still as clean as new. Not to mention the blood, there is not even a trace of dust. The number of bandits, although there were many, their quality was uneven, and the fighting relied solely on bravery and no formation strategy. They were quickly killed by Zhao Changkong until they were defeated. The leader of the bandit quietly hid next to him with a few of his henchmen, trying to make them as safe as possible. He was inconspicuous and wanted to find an opportunity to escape quietly. From the beginning, he never wanted to fight Xiaowaji head-on. Are you kidding? This is a powerful Grand Master? How can a small innate warrior like him be able to fight against him? Can't see me, can't see me, can't see me. The eldest master kept fighting and walking, gradually approaching the rear. Seeing that the escape route was right in front of him, the eldest master's face showed joy. However, at this moment, a sword light whizzed past, instantly drowning him and his men together. The bandit leader didn't even have time to say his last words, and his body was already gone. The boss is dead, run away. As soon as the boss died, the bandits' morale collapsed instantly, and the bandits began to flee. At this moment, a series of big explosions suddenly occurred in the cottage. Boom! 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 Continuous explosions occurred in every corner of the cottage. Exploded, fireballs exploded, and balls of flames shot up into the sky. The powerful explosion shockwave directly blew the people close to them into pieces. Whether they were fleeing bandits or soldiers, they were all blown into pieces of flesh and bones in an instant. Nothing left. Be careful, the bandits have gunpowder, don't move. Zhao Changkong roared angrily and warned loudly. When he saw his men being blown to pieces, his eyes instantly turned red. However, the explosion had not stopped yet. The gunpowder in the cottage seemed to be endless, and it seemed that they would not all be destroyed. We won't stop until we are killed. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full-level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 297. Under the indiscriminate bombardment of gunpowder, ordinary soldiers had no power to resist and could only wait to die. Even Xiaowaji was too late to save them. After some bombing, the explosion finally stopped. The entire village had been completely reduced to a sea of flames, with burnt corpses everywhere. Zhao Changkong looked at the corpses everywhere, and his heart was bleeding. Before, they fought from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, and less than 100 soldiers were killed. However, this indiscriminate bombing killed thousands of them. Such a huge loss made Zhao Changkong so angry that he almost went crazy. Ah! Damn it! Damn it! These hateful bandits should all die. Zhao Changkong went into the sea of fire with a long gun and killed the remaining bandits one by one. But Xiao Wuji felt that it was not the bandits who buried the gunpowder. If the bandits had buried it, they would not have killed their own people. The explosion just now, there were many more bandits killed than soldiers. Whoosh! Suddenly a sound of breaking wind sounded. Xiao Wuji reacted instantly, looked back, and found that a stream of light was shooting towards his face. The stream of light was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye he saw it had already arriving in front of Xiao Wuji. There was a loud bang and the stream of light exploded. A fireball with a diameter of more than 40 meters exploded, swallowing up and destroying a camp. Mr. Xiao. Zhao Changkong saw Xiao Wuji being engulfed by the explosion flames, and he roared immediately. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, black shadows flickered and appeared, and the person who came was the dead soldier of King Yu. My lord, Xiao Wuji was hit. A dead soldier came behind Mr. Wen and said excitedly. Mr. Wen looked at the sea of fire with sharp eyes and said expressionlessly, "Don't be careless, Xiao Wuji is not that easy to kill." "You are right, I will not die that easily." Xiao Wuji's voice suddenly sounded. The expressions of Mr. Wen and the many dead soldiers changed greatly, and they turned around at the same time. Behind them, they saw a young man with a solemn expression standing behind them, and it was Xiao Wuji. Xiao Wuji's clouds were light and windy, and his clothes were neat. "Say goodbye." He said he was injured, but there wasn't even the slightest stain on it. "I haven't seen Hong Tianlei for a long time. I have seen it twice, but it's a pity that it is of no use to me," Xiao Wuji said lightly. The stream of light that attacked him just now was a thunderbolt, a gunpowder weapon second only to the furious Kylin in the world, which could threaten the powerful Grand Master. On the night when the demon cult invaded Jinling City, Xiao Wuji he was one sneak attacked by a master of the demon sect with the thunderbolt, so he recognized him at a glance. But the thunderbolt was useless to him. Even the strongest Fury Kirin had no effect on Xiao Wuji. "You, when did you come behind us?" A dead soldier looked at Xiao Wuji who appeared behind them, his face dull, horrified and unbelievable. He just saw Xiao Wuji being hit by thunder, but in fact. Xiao Wuji glanced at the many dead soldiers coldly and said indifferently, "A person who is about to die does not need to know so much." "Hi!" With a flash of lightning, Xiao Wuji has disappeared. The next second, the head of the dead soldier who just asked the question, together with the dead soldiers around him, all flew up. While blood spurted out from the broken neck, more than a dozen others, the dead soldiers, were also beheaded. Where is he? Is it a human or a ghost? Is he a human or a ghost? This group of dead soldiers had never seen such fast Qinggong, so that they could not see the shadow of Xiao Wuji at all. The lightning flashed quickly among the dead soldiers, everyone was extremely frightened, and they died before they could react. Mr. Wen he jumped up and used Qinggong to try to get out of Xiao Wuji's killing range. However, his speed was far behind Xiao Wuji. The moment he flew up, Xiao Wuji had appeared behind him. Kang! Knife! In a flash of light, Mr. Wen's body was divided into two parts, and blood was scattered across the sky. Mr. Wen's eyes were not closed yet, and they were full of unwillingness and resentment. He wanted to avenge the deposed king of Yu, but he tried his best, but he couldn't hurt a single part of Xiao Wuji's body. "It's a hair on my head." He used all his tricks, but in front of Xiao Wuji, he was like a juggler. "Your Majesty, my subordinates have tried their best." The scene in Mr. Wen's eyes quickly hung upside down, and then his consciousness completely fell into darkness. Xiao Wuji turned over and landed on the ground, glanced disdainfully at the corpse on the ground, turned and left. After that, Zhao Changkong led his men to wipe out all the bandits. Originally there were a few prisoners, but Zhao Changkong went into a rage because of the heavy casualties of his men and killed all the prisoners directly. After the battle, the soldiers began to search the bandit camp and collect the corpses of their comrades. "General Zhao, what are the casualties?" Xiao Wuji asked. Zhao Changkong looked sad and said sadly 1,285 soldiers were killed and more than 400 were injured. More than half. Xiao Wuji's face also looked a little ugly. Before the war started, the casualties that Xiao Wuji expected were not that big at all. It can only be said that the last series of big explosions came too suddenly and too unprepared. A mortal body with a mortal body cannot face such a big explosion like gunpowder. The killing weapon is indeed too fragile. We can only blame these bandits for being so cunning that they planted so much gunpowder in their camp. Zhao Changkong was indignant. "General, the ordnance has been found." At this moment, a soldier hurriedly ran over to report. Xiao Wuji and Zhao Changkong followed the soldiers to the warehouse and found a large amount of ordnance. "Great, finally found it. General Zhao, order the soldiers to transport all the ordnance here. Also, all the weapons in the bandit camp must be recovered." "Yes." Zhao Changkong respectfully accepted the order. At the same time, the electronic sound of the system also sounded in Xiao Wuji's mind. "Ding, it is detected that the host has wiped out the remnants of the Yu King's rebellion and completed the task of wiping out the rebels. Do you want to receive the reward?" "Receive." "Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining the full level of astrological law. The rewards are being distributed and the distribution is completed." A huge amount of information poured into Xiao Wuji's mind. This huge amount of information included celestial phenomena, stars, heaven and earth, nature and so on. The astrological law comes from the bright moon world of the Qin dynasty. It is a kind of yin-yang magic and is the fourth level of yin-yang magic. The laws of astrology can be used to predict the future and calculate everything in the world through the stars on the zodiac chart. As everyone knows, things in the world are unpredictable. In the world of the Qin dynasty, only the yin and yang family could find the inextricable connections between the changes in the heaven and earth from the ever-changing trajectory of the stars. This is what is called that everyone has a destiny, and there is a certain destiny. Under the indoctrination of the system, Xiao Wuji's understanding of astrological laws instantly reached full level. In an instant, Xiao Wuji felt that the world in his eyes had become different. This feeling is different from the transformation that occurs when one breaks through the unity of heaven and man. It is not a transformation of the six senses, nor is it a transformation of the soul. But Xiao Wuji had a new understanding of all things and the nature of heaven and earth. Everything in heaven and earth is connected, and you can know the whole picture just by looking at it. At this moment, Xiao Wu felt that his ability to predict and divine secrets had reached an unprecedented level. Everything is at your will, and you can see all the secrets of the world at a glance. Everything in the world is under your control. This feeling is amazing and fascinating. I don't know whether my ability to detect heavenly secrets is stronger or weaker than that of Old Man Tianji. In the arena, Old Man Tianji is naturally the strongest in terms of his ability to deduce Tianji. But Xiao Wuji felt that he could also compete with Old Man Tianji. The soldiers stayed on Wuxia mountain for a day and a night, and finally on the second day the sun was setting on the mountain. All the ordnance was loaded into trucks and transported by bandit horses. The bodies of the dead soldiers were also recovered and transported back for burial. On the third day, Xiao Wuji led his people back to Black Eagle City. Inside the Black Eagle City military camp in the middle, Xiao Wuji and Huainan King Xiao Yuanxiang stand opposite each other. "Your Majesty, this is the whole process of this trip to suppress bandits." More than 1,000 soldiers were killed or injured because of improper command by the subordinate. When the subordinate returned to Beijing, he would apologize to His Majesty the Emperor. Xiao Wuji said with cupped fists. King Huainan sighed and said, on the battlefield, the sword has no eyes, and death and injury are inevitable. You used 3,000 soldiers and horses to annihilate more than 10,000 mountain bandits. This is an example of defeating many with less. What crime do you have? As for the soldiers who died in battle, they died to protect the country and the people, and they deserved their death. Xiao Wuji said, it's fine as long as the prince doesn't blame you. Now that the suppression of bandits has been completed, the official will return to Beijing to resume his duties. So fast. The king of Huainan frowned slightly. He didn't care at all whether Xiao Wuji could leave or not. What he cared about was Xia Xinran. If Xiao Wuji wanted to return to Beijing, Xia Xinran would naturally go with him. But he hadn't seen him for several years. He has a daughter, and he really can't bear to be separated as soon as they meet. Even if he can bear it, the princess can't bear it. How about Xiaoqian, who's staying in Black Eagle City longer? Anyway, the mission has been completed, there is no need to rush back to Beijing. Although Black Eagle City is not as prosperous as Jinling, there are many surrounding attractions. Xiao, the household is interested, I can send his soldiers to lead the way for Xiaoqianhu. It's rare for Xiaoqianhu to come to the southern border to lie down. I must entertain Xiaoqianhu well. Isn't this unnecessary? Alas, use it, Xiaoqianhu doesn't have to be polite to this king. The king of Huainan stroked his beard and laughed and said, when the princess and Xinran express their love for each other, Xiaoqianhu can take Xinran back to the capital. Xiao Wuji said. Third brother Yuan Xiong said that if the prince and princess are willing, they can keep Princess Xinran by their side without returning to Beijing. If Miss Xinran wants to stay in the southern border, is Wang Hao, the official can leave on her own. How is that possible? The king of Huainan frowned and said, the border is dangerous, why is a woman like Xinran here? Is Jinling safer? After a few days, the princess was willing to give up, and I asked Xinran and Xiaoqianhu to return to the capital. These words were categorical and without hesitation. A glint flashed in Xiao Wuji's eyes, and he thought that King Huainan was indeed an old fox. He had already figured out that this was a test by the emperor. Since he understood that it was a test, King Huainan would not fall for it. In this way, Xiao Wuji was left in Black Eagle City by the king of Huainan. He was entertained with good wine and delicious food every day, served by beautiful servants, and had a great time traveling around the mountains and rivers. An ordinary person would have been killed by this kind of drunkenness. The life of Xuehua and Song Liman was obsessed with their minds, just like Xuehua and Song Liman. The two of them were no longer happy to miss Xu. Only Xiao Wuji was determined and dismissed it. On this day, Xiao Wuji was wandering in the military camp. The king of Huainan said, there are no restrictions on Xiao Wuji's actions. No matter where Xiao Wuji wants to go, there will be someone to guide Xiao Wuji. Even if it is a military camp, Xiao Wuji has no hindrance in entering and exiting. As soon as he arrived at the gate of the camp, Xiao Wuji heard the roar of King Huainan, this group of Nanliang clowns are provoking and causing trouble again and again. It's really unbearable. Lu Guang, take your people immediately and kill those Nanliang bastards for me. The general will obey. The general named Lu Guang received the order with his fists clasped, and his body was filled with murderous aura. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full-level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 298. What's going on here? What happened? Xiao Wuji walked into the camp and asked curiously. It turned out to be Xiaoqianhu. How could he have time to come to the military camp today? When the king of Huainan saw Xiao Wuji's arrival, he calmed down his anger and asked with a smile. Xiao Wuji said, I have been traveling around the mountains and rivers all day, and I am so idle that I am almost getting moldy, so I came to the military camp to have a look. What happened today? How could the prince be so angry? The king of Waynan didn't answer. Lieutenant General Li Guan clasped his fists and said, "Go back to Xiaoqianhu. Someone came to report today. An army from Nanliang was found outside the city coming to attack the Grass Valley. There have been civilian casualties. The prince is upright and sends his generals to the rescue." "I see." Xiao Wuji nodded slightly. "The essence of raiding the Grass Valley is to plunder the people's wealth to use as military pay. At the border junction of the two countries, it is normal to raid the Grass Valley between each other. Now the Zhou dynasty is rich and there is no shortage of military pay, so it has been many years since there was no need to plow grass valleys. But Nanliang was not as wealthy as Zhou dynasty, so troops plowing grass valleys often happened. Although the king of Waynan sent troops to hunt down grass valleys every time, the ones who plowed grass valleys were usually cavalry. They go as quickly as they come. By the time the Black Eagle army arrives, the Nanliang army has often fled long ago. The enemy troops in Nanliang are killing my people and taking away my wealth. They should be killed." Xiao Wuji also showed anger. He was angry not because he felt a sense of belonging to the Zhou dynasty, but because the Nanliang army was attacking unarmed civilians. In Xiao Wuji's view, the armies of the two countries were fighting on the battlefield, and life and death depended on it. That is natural. But if the army kills the people, then everyone should be killed. This reminds Xiao Wuji of the chicken in the past life. The army of that country is also so cruel and tyrannical, and everyone deserves to be killed. "Your Majesty, please let me go with you this time. I happen to be idle and bored, so kill a few Nanliang violent soldiers to relieve my boredom." Xiao Wuji looked at King Huainan and said, "Oh. Xiaoqianhu also wants to go, so 117 is really the best." The king of Waynan smiled and said, "Xiaoqianhu's determination to protect his family and country really makes me admire him. Okay, Xiaoqianhu will go with Lu Guang." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Xiao Wuji clasped his fists in response, and then strode away with Lu Guang. Looking at Xiao Wuji's leaving back, King Huainan had a complicated look in his eyes, with an unclear meaning. Soon, Xiao Wuji and Lu Guang led their troops out of the city. There were only 1,000 people, but they were all cavalry. 1,000 people galloped on the official road, splashing up rolling yellow sand and flying dust for thousands of meters. "Xiaoqianhu, what should we do next?" In the end, all generals will obey Xiaoqianhu's orders. Xiao Wuji showed his strength that day. Lu Guang was also in the army formation and had already been impressed by Xiao Wuji's strength. Now acting together, he was naturally willing to bow his head and obey orders. Xiao Wuji said, "General Lu, there is no need to care about me. This operation everything stops, General Liu's. I have only one purpose for this trip, and that is to kill people." Lu Guang laughed loudly. Xiaoqianhu said it well, "We are here to kill people. The violent soldiers in Nanliang killed our people and invaded our land. Everyone should be killed. Brothers, have you heard what Xiaoqianhu said? When I see the barbarians in Nanliang later, I will kill them all and leave no one alive." "Yes." 1,000 soldiers at the rear roared in unison, each with a fierce look in their eyes and murderous intent on their faces. "Drive! Drive! Drive!" Everyone speeded up their march and soon disappeared on the official road. Although Black Eagle City was the southernmost city in the Great Zhou dynasty, there were still many small villages around the city. The troops of Nanliang were digging grass valleys and chose these small villages. The people living in these villages are ordinary people. There are not many people, and there are even fewer men. Facing the ferocious and cruel Nanliang army, they are lambs to be slaughtered. The Nanliang army will destroy the grass and valleys. Kill all the men, and take back their daughters and children. Women can give birth to children for them, and can also be slaves. Children are also the best candidates to be slaves, and they can also do some dirty work. The Nanliang violent soldiers will not care about them. Life or death, anyway, you can catch new ones if you die. In a small village south of Black Hawk City, there were screams and screams. Several thatched houses were burning with raging fire, and the bodies of several men were lying on the ground in front of the door. Several powerful Nanliang soldiers laughed ferociously and dragged women out of the house one by one. The louder the women cried, the more excited they became. A child ran over to save his mother, but was kicked by a soldier. Fly! How could the child resist the warrior's furious kick? He was kicked to death. Outside the house, a woman hugged her child and ran away desperately. There was blood on her body, her linen clothes were torn, and her hair was disheveled. The woman was naked. He stood on his 2 feet, which had been pricked by stones and dripping with blood. But the woman did not stop. She wanted to live, she did not want to die. Even if it was not for herself, she must live for her children. Behind him, several the Nanliang violent soldiers laughed. They did not go up to chase the woman, because they knew that the woman could not escape from their hands. A Nanliang violent soldier picked up his bow and arrow, aimed at the woman in front of him, let go, and whoosh, with a loud sound, a feather arrow shot out of the air and shot towards the woman's back. Just when the feather arrow was about to hit the woman, an invisible energy burst through the air and hit the arrow cluster of the feather arrow. With a pop, the arrows shattered into pieces and scattered all over the ground. However, the stones were not broken. After the arrows were shattered, the power remained unabated, and they shot towards the Nanliang violent soldiers who were shooting the arrows. With a pop, the Nanliang violent soldiers' head exploded, and red and white things scattered in all directions, splashing on the face of the soldier next to him. Who? The faces of several Nanliang violent soldiers changed greatly, and they immediately drew their swords and roared. The next second, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky, making a sound of thunder and thunder. The person who came was Xiao Wuji. Then the ground began to shake, and an army rushed over. A majestic flag swayed with the strong wind, with a majestic black eagle on it. Great Joe Black Eagle Army. When the Nanliang violent soldiers saw the flag of the Black Eagle Army, they were all shocked. Escape! Retreat quickly! The general leading the Nanliang violent troops roared loudly. Without saying a word, he got on his horse and wanted to escape from here. They came to hunt for grass in the valley, not to fight with the Black Eagle Army, CJDD. The combat power of the Nanliang Army, they are already inferior to the Black Hawk Army, and the number of people who join them will be even smaller. If they fight head-on, the whole army will definitely be annihilated. If you catch up with them, don't let any of them escape. Kill them without mercy. Lu Guang roared loudly, and the speed of the horse under his crotch suddenly accelerated. Xiao Wuji was faster than Lu Guang. With a flash of lightning, Xiao Wuji had appeared next to the general leading the Nanliang violent troops. The general's eyes were wide open, wanting to draw his sword and kill Xiao Wuji. However, a flash of sword suddenly appeared like a lightning shuttle. With a flash of sword, the general and his horse were killed by Xiao Wuji. Cut into 4 pieces. Before the general's sword was unsheathed, the man's soul had already disappeared. After killing the general, the electric light disappeared instantly and shuttled back and forth among many Nanliang violent soldiers. With a hiss, the electric light suddenly stopped, Xiao Wuji appeared and slowly sheathed his sword. Those who violate our borders will be killed without mercy. After the words fell, a blood mark opened on the necks of the Nanliang violent soldiers behind them, and then their heads rose into the sky. Their headless bodies collapsed, but no blood flowed out of the broken necks. Because the fractures had been frozen by the cold air. Died. The general is dead. Run quickly, this man is a strong master. We are no match for him. The remaining Nanliang violent soldiers were so frightened when they saw Xiao Wuji going on a killing spree that they all turned into birds and beasts and fled in all directions. They didn't have enough eyesight and only thought that Xiao Wuji was a powerful master. But they didn't know that Xiao Wuji was a strong master. It is an existence above the master and the powerful. Now that you're here, don't leave and leave your life behind. Xiao Wuji's eyes were cold, like thousands of years of ice. Shui Yin's mad sword came out of its sheath and let out a sword cry. Then a flash of sword light shot out of the air, killing more than a dozen Nanliang violent soldiers. At this time, Lu Guang also they had already arrived and started chasing the Nanliang violent soldiers. This group of Nanliang violent soldiers had been scared out of their courage by Xiao Wuji, and their combat strength had been reduced by 70 to 80%. Facing the pursuit of Lu Guang and others, even those who resisted, I don't even have the courage, I just focus on escaping, so it's very easy to kill. Spare your life. Spare me. I beg you adults to spare your lives. I will never dare to do this again. Spare our lives. Seeing that they could not escape, several Nanliang violent soldiers began to kneel down and kowtow to beg for mercy. The appearance of being greedy for life and fearing death, begging for mercy was really disgusting. Xiao Wuji did not kill them, but just broke their limbs and gathered them together. Together. Lu Guang led his men to almost wipe out the violent soldiers in Nanliang, and also captured 20 or 30 prisoners. Their limbs were also broken. These disabled prisoners were thrown at the entrance of the small village, and the surviving villagers had been killed by the soldiers. Rescued. Thank you generals for your life-saving grace. An old villager with white beard and hair, along with a dozen men and 40 or 50 women, knelt in front of Xiao Wuji and others, kowtowed and thanked him. There used to be more than 300 people in this village, but now there are only these few people. Get up quickly, everyone. Xiao Wuji hurriedly stepped forward and said. These Nanliang violent soldiers were cruel and bloodthirsty, and they did not regret death. Old man, if you want revenge, execute them yourself. The reason why Xiao Wuji keeps prisoners is for this purpose. Revenge can only be solved by taking revenge by others. Only by taking revenge with one's own hands can the hatred be relieved. The women are still a little afraid and dare not kill. But the men are different. They look at the prisoners. The Nanliang violent soldiers' eyes had long been red and their bodies were shaking. Now after hearing Xiao Wuji's words, they rushed forward without any hesitation. You evil thief who deserves to be killed, I asked you to kill my father, I will kill you. It was you who killed my wife. What's wrong with my son? Are you going to kick him to death? The men picked up the knives on the ground and slashed at the prisoners randomly. Although the moves were messy, they were enough to kill people. After a series of slashes, a dozen prisoners were hacked to death by them. The remaining prisoners were so frightened that they wet their pants and looked in horror. Let out screams one after another, like pigs waiting to be slaughtered. With men taking the lead, women were no longer afraid, and rushed forward with swords and machetes. Accompanied by bursts of miserable wails, all the prisoners were killed. The men and the women hugged each other and cried bitterly. Although the great revenge was avenged, they finally lost their loved ones and were extremely sad. Xiao Wuji couldn't bear it and asked Lu Guangdao, do soldiers from Nanliang often come to harvest grass and valleys? Lu Guang was silent for a moment, nodded and said it used to be rare, but in the past 2 or 3 years, it happens almost once or twice every month. Although we would send troops every time, we could only catch them 3 or 4 times out of 10 times, and they escaped the rest of the time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 299. The prince also thought about letting all the people outside the city move to Black Hawk City, but these people's houses and fields are here, and they can't live without it. Moreover, there are too many small villages like this and they are so scattered that even if you want to relocate, you can't. We can only try our best to save, but someone always gets killed. Lu Guang clenched his fists tightly, and his nails had already been dug into his flesh. He let the blood flow out without feeling anything. As a general, he is responsible for protecting his family and the country, and protecting his people. The Nanliang troops are violently under their noses. Killing the people is the greatest insult to them. If possible, Lu Guang and other soldiers would have wanted to go to war with Nanliang. But the war between the two countries is not just a matter of saying a word. Once the war starts, people will die. Yes, it consumes a lot of the country's money, food, and national strength. It would be okay if they win. If they lose, Emperor Jingtai will lose his prestige and lose the people's support. Besides, the Great Zhou dynasty is not only a neighboring country with Nanliang. If he rashly starts a war with Nanliang, Northern Yan, Yechin, and other countries may also use troops against the Great Zhou. At that time, the Great Zhou will be involved in a multi-front war. There are many countries outside, and there are remnants of the previous dynasty inside who are plotting to create a new kingdom. Under internal and external difficulties, Emperor Jingtai simply cannot. They didn't dare to start a war easily. After settling the refugees, Xiao Wuji and Lu Guang led the army back to Black Eagle City. After that, Xiao Wuji stayed in Black Eagle City for another 7 days. Princess Weinan was finally willing to let Xia Xinran leave. Outside Black Eagle City, Princess Weinan and Xia Xinran hugged each other, and the mother and daughter said goodbye reluctantly. King Weinan said to Xiao Wuji, when I return to Beijing this time, my daughter's safety depends entirely on Xiao Qinhu. Xiao Wuji clasped his fists and said, don't worry, Your Majesty, as long as the official is still alive, the princess will be safe. With Xiao Qinhu's words, I feel relieved. While he was speaking, King Huainan waved, and the steward behind him immediately presented a rosewood box. The surface of the box was inlaid with gems and the carvings were exquisite. It looked like it was of the highest quality. This box alone is worth thousands or even tens of thousands of taels of silver. The things inside are naturally more precious. King Huainan said, it's a small thought, but it's not respectful. I hope Xiao Qinhu will accept it. Xiao Wuji quickly pretended to be frightened, took 2 steps back and said, Your Majesty has broken the official, and the official dare not. Take it, it's just a small gift. Don't you dare? How dare you accept a gift from the prince? This is extremely disrespectful, Your Majesty, please take it back. Xiao Wuji backed away again and again. He lacks nothing, and there is no need to cause trouble for no reason. The relationship between the King of Huainan and the Emperor is very delicate, and Xiao Wuji does not want to wade into this muddy water. Since my father gave it to you, just accept it. It's not a big deal anyway. Xia Xinran came over and said, and took the wooden box from the butler's hand. King Huainan saw this, stroked his beard and smiled, did not say anything, just watched quietly. Then, Xiao Wuji got on his horse, said goodbye and left. Drive. Xiao Wuji rode his horse forward and left Black Eagle City with Xia Xinran and others. Horse hooves splashed and yellow sand rolled. Xiao Wuji and his party quickly disappeared on the official road. When Xiao Wuji left, King Huainan, the smile on his face disappeared instantly. He looked at the direction Xiao Wuji left with complicated eyes and whispered softly, this Xiao Wuji is actually a smart man. Princess Huainan came over and said, I hope he can protect Xinran and send her back to Jinling safely. It's a pity that Chen Concubine and Xinran only got together for a few days, and Chen Concubine still had a lot to say to Xinran. As she spoke, Princess Huainan was about to cry again. King Huainan held the princess in his arms and comforted her. Don't worry, our family will be reunited soon. On the official road, Xiao Wuji and his party of 5 people galloped on their horses. Xiao Xinran opened the rosewood box and found a secret book and a bottle of elixir inside. The secret book was a top 7th grade martial arts, and the elixir was an 8th grade elixir. They are all extremely precious treasures. Putting them outside is enough to make masters go crazy and fight for them at the risk of their lives. My father is so kind to you. He gave you such a precious gift when we first met. Now, here you go. Xiao Xinran was a little apprehensive, so she closed the wooden box and handed it to Xiao Wuji. Xiao Wuji did not accept it and said calmly, since the princess accepted it, let the princess take it. There is no need to give it to me. Xiao Xinran was a little surprised and said, this is the top 7th grade martial arts, and there is also an 8th grade elixir, but you don't want it. Xiao Wuji said, I don't lack these. If the princess likes it, just keep it. Once you accept the gift from King Huainan, you are likely to get into trouble, and Xiao Wuji doesn't want that. Besides, the top 7th level martial arts is nothing in Xiao Wuji's eyes. All the magical skills he has learned are comparable to 9th level martial arts. As for 8th level elixirs, Xiao Wuji doesn't even need them. He wiped out the entire Li family and collected too many elixirs from the Li mansion. As for the elixir reserves, Xiao Wuji's secret room in his house kept them. It's even comparable to the secret arsenal of Jinyue. Huh, you don't know the goods. Since you don't want it, I will accept it without mercy. When this princess learns this top-level 7th level martial arts, her strength will definitely become stronger. Xiao Xinran happily put the gift in the bag. Seeing Xiao Wuji's actions, the beautiful woman Anhua secretly sighed in her heart that Xiao Wuji was really a smart person and was not blinded by interests. On the way back, Xiao Wuji and his party were not on the road. Delayed. After 18 days, I finally returned to Jinling City. After more than a month of this trip, the climate in Jinling City has changed drastically. The snow has melted and the temperature is no longer so cold. Let's go back to Fuzi, Bijin. Although Xiao Wuji wants to go home to see Suwaner as soon as possible, he must also return to Yuanxiang. Although he is the 13th Taibao, the rules cannot be messed up. Xiaoqianhu. Xiaoqianhu is back. It looks like another great victory. When the Jinyi guards who were standing guard at the gate of Fuzi in Bijin saw Xiao Wuji returning, they quickly came up to lead the horse, with a look of flattery and awe on their faces. Thanks for your hard work. Xiao Wuji smiled and nodded, and strode into Bijin Fuzi. Shuehua and Song Liman also held their heads high, swaggering, and looked proud. The Jinyi Wei in Bijin Fuzi saw Shuehua and Song Liman with spring breeze in their faces. Both Song Liman and Song Liman couldn't help but feel jealous. These two people are really lucky. Yes, following Xiaoqianhu, these two have repeatedly made meritorious deeds, and their merits are almost catching up with ours. How long has it been? I think it won't take long for these two people to be promoted to trial 100 households. Try 100 households. Impossible. If you want to be a member of the Beihu trial, you must have peak innate cultivation. These two are still far behind, right? With Xiaoqianhu guaranteeing the two of them, what's impossible? Moreover, with the constant guidance of Xiaoqianhu, a powerful master, these two people's martial arts realm has also improved by leaps and bounds. It's only a matter of time before you can break through to the peak of the innate world. Maybe there's still a glimmer of hope to break through to the master level. Impossible, how can a grandmaster break through so easily? Impossible, absolutely impossible, unless a miracle occurs. Haha, what else is impossible for Xiaoqianhu? Are there not many miracles that have happened to Xiaoqianhu? Xiaoqianhu himself is a miracle. I really envy these two people. One of them attains enlightenment, and the chicken and the dog ascend to heaven. Why didn't I have such good luck back then? If I could follow Xiaoqianhu back then, would things be different now? Well, Many Jinyaiwei were talking about it, and everyone had different emotions. In short, with the rise of Xiaowuji, many people regretted it. Some people regretted not establishing a good relationship with Xiaowuji in advance. Now even if they kneel down and lick Xiaowuji will not look at it. Some people envy Xuehua and Song Liman for being able to hug Xiaowuji's thick thigh. Following Xiaowuji, not only can they get promoted and make a fortune, but they can also have Xiaowuji guide them on the path of martial arts. The guidance of a great master, no amount of money can buy this. Xuehua and Song Liman have long been accustomed to the envious and jealous eyes of others. The more envious and jealous others are, the more proud they are. This is the feeling of having a background and a backer. Third brother, I'm back. Xiaowuji came to the middle hall of Qinhu Institute and saw Yuan Xiong sitting in the main seat reading files. Hearing Xiaowuji's voice, Yuan Xiong looked up at him and smiled. I'm back. How was your trip? Xiaowuji found a seat and sat down, took a sip of tea from his cup, moistened his throat, and said everything went well, all the rebels were wiped out. This is the briefing. With that said, Xiaowuji handed over a briefing. To be honest, Xiaowu didn't like writing briefings. Even after being a Jinyaiwei for more than a year, Xiaowuji didn't like writing briefings. Instead of letting him write with a pen, it would be better to let him kill people with a knife. Yuan Xiong took the briefing and glanced at it roughly, nodded and said this matter was done well, and I really did not disappoint my third brother if I left it to you. Xiaowuji said, when have I ever let third brother down? Yuan Xiong laughed loudly, that's right, that's right. You are the number one genius of our Jinyi guards in 100 years. You have never failed. Just wait for the third brother to report this to your majesty, and the reward will come soon. Including your investigation of the ordnance case and the elimination of the rebels this time, your title will surely be raised again. Oh? Real? Of course it's true. Then I'll just wait for the good news. By the way, third brother, this mission is completed, can I take a rest for a while? Xiaowuji said with a smile. Yuan Xiong smiled playfully and said, you want to have a deep love with your younger siblings, right? Xiaowuji said, it's fine that third brother knows, there's no need to say it out loud. Yuan Xiong stroked his beard and said, you have been away for more than a month this time. I think my brothers and sisters must have missed you too much. Let's do this. You go home to reunite with your siblings first, and you won't be on duty for the time being. If there is a mission, third brother will send someone to call you. Okay, thank you third brother. I'll take my leave. After saying that, Xiaowuji stood up and strode away. As a powerful Grand Master and the 13th Taibao, Xiaowuji has many privileges that other Qinhu households do not have. For example, during this special period, Xiaowuji has more freedom than other Qinhu households. Return to Xiao Mansion as quickly as possible. When the martial arts guard at the entrance of Xiao Mansion saw Xiaowuji coming back, he quickly bowed and saluted. Met the young master. No need to be polite. Xiaowuji waved his hand and walked quickly into the Xiao Mansion. All the servants and maids along the way saluted Xiaowuji, but Xiaowuji ignored him and went straight to the back house. In the Xiao Mansion garden, in the pavilion, Su Wainer was embroidering. Suddenly the maid Xiaolan ran over quickly, shouting as she ran, Miss, Uncle is back, Uncle is back. Real. Su Wainer was overjoyed. Martial arts, become invincible starting from the full-level magic system. Author, Drunk in March at West Lake. Chapter 300. Real. Su Wainer was overjoyed. By accident, her finger was pricked by a needle, and a drop of blood flowed out. But Su Wainer felt no pain, and her face was filled with joy. She quickly stood up and walked out of the pavilion. At this moment, a flash of lightning suddenly flashed in front of her eyes. Past. Su Wainer's eyes blurred. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Xiao Wuji already standing in front of her. Xiao Lang. Su Weiner shouted and threw herself into Xiao Wuji's arms, hugging Xiao Wuji tightly, not wanting to let go for a moment. Xiao Lang, Weiner misses you so much. Xiao Wuji put his arms around Su Weiner's slender waist, touched her head, and said softly, I miss Weiner too. Xiao Wuji hugged Su Weiner like this, and the two stood quietly, listening to each other's heartbeats. The maid Xiaolan had already blushed with shame, covered her face and ran away. Her heart was beating wildly. The uncle and the young lady are really not ashamed. They hug each other like this in public. Aren't they afraid that others will see them? Of course Xiao Wuji is not afraid. My wife, what's wrong with hugging her? This is legal and reasonable. When the maid in the attached middle school knew that Xiao Wuji was back, she immediately prepared bath water for Xiao Wuji. They all knew that Xiao Wuji, after returning from a mission, you must take a shower first to wash away the dust and bad luck. Naturally, it was Su Weiner who took Xiao Wuji's bath. With Su Weiner's scream, Su Wan's 230 son was also pulled into the tub by Xiao Wuji. After that, of course, the harp and the harp played in harmony, and the mandarin ducks played in the water. 100,000 words are omitted here. The next day, in the back garden of the Xiao mansion, Xiao Wuji and Gongsun Ao were sitting opposite each other, and the two were playing chess. Xiao Wuji was holding the black chess piece, and Gong Ao was playing chess, holding the white chess piece. The two men's chess style was as dynamic as thunder and extremely aggressive, so the fierce battle on the chessboard was extremely fierce. Xiao Wuji dropped a black stone and asked, has there been anything strange in the house in the past month? Gongsun Ao dropped a white stone and replied, there have been several groups of uninvited guests. They are all unscrupulous little thieves. They have been dealt with by me. Oh? Where is this thief from? Have you found out its origin? I found out, they are from Shenshui Palace. Shenshui Palace. A cold light flashed in Xiao Wuji's eyes. Gongsun Ao asked, do you have any grudges with Shenshui Palace? Xiao Wuji said, I killed the young palace master of Shenshui Palace. In Xiao Wuji's view, this is not a big deal, so it doesn't matter if he tells Gongsun Ao. Hearing this, Gongsun Ao said calmly, expressionless, it's a big bad luck for him to meet you. Xiao Wuji said, the young master of Shenshui Palace is called Xiao Wuchen. The name doesn't suit him. Gongsun Ao shook his head and said, he is not lucky enough to suppress this name. Xiao Wuji smiled and said, since when did you believe in luck? Gongsun Ao said, while I was leaving Jinling City, I met a strange man. Strange person? Interesting, tell me. Xiao Wuji showed a hint of interest. Gongsun Ao said, he gave me a fortune-telling, saying that my fate was rough. I was lonely in the first half of my life, but in the future I will be able to become a marquis and general, have many children, many heirs, and be famous for generations. Sounds like a bad guy. Xiao Wuji said with a smile. Gongsun Ao is just a wandering cultivator with no connection with the imperial court. How can he be granted a title as a general? He is almost 40 years old this year and is still alone without a wife. How can he have a group of children? This what the strange man said has nothing to do with Gongsun Ao. What is it if he is not a magic stick? Gongsun Ao said, I didn't believe it at first, but this man's divination is very accurate and extraordinary. It is the only one I have seen in my life. I can believe it even if I don't believe it. Xiao Wuji asked, where did you meet this strange man? Gongsun Ao said, one day I showed up at Qinfanjiayuan, and he was at the window on the third floor of Qinfanjiayuan. Xiao Wuji frowned, why does this sound so familiar? Qinfanjiayuan is a famous brothel in Jinling City. Is there any strange person who would tell people's fortunes in the brothel? As far as Xiao Wuji knows, there is only one person. Xiao Wuji asked, what does that strange man look like? Gongsun Ao said his beard and hair are all white, but his skin is as delicate as that of a young man. According to my judgment, this person's cultivation level is extremely high. He is at least a late-stage Grand Master, or even stronger. It's just that among the experts I know, no one is consistent with this person. Xiao Wuji thought to himself, of course not, because this person is a master of the unity of heaven and man. Based on what Gongsun Ao said, Xiao Wuji can conclude that the strange person he is talking about is Old Man Tianji. Except for Old Man Tianji, there is no master who hangs around the brothel and Chu palace all day long. Xiao Wuji did not expect that so much time has passed. Old Man Tianji he actually stayed in Jinling City, and lingered in the brothel all day long. He would not stop until he ordered all the courtesans in Jinling City. If Xiao Wuchen is said to be a hungry ghost in lust, then this is a secret. The old man is even better than Xiao Wuchen. Xiao Wuji is really amazing. The master has cultivated to look like him, and this is the only one in the world. Do you want me to help you with the Shenshui Palace matter? Gongsun Ao asked, dropping a white stone. Xiao Wuji shook his head. No, I can handle it myself. Maybe Shenshui Palace was gone before I took action. The world is impermanent, the universe is unpredictable, and destiny is elusive. As you said, the Shenshui Palace has insufficient luck and may be destined to decline. While speaking, Xiao Wuji dropped a black stone. The chess pieces on the chessboard immediately formed an ambush from all sides, and the sickle moon scimitar killed Gongsun Ao's white dragon. Thousands of miles away from Jinling City, there was a majestic mountain. The top of the mountain was surrounded by it is flattened and there are pavilions and pavilions located in it. This is where the sect of Shenshui Palace is located. On the Shenshui Palace martial arts training ground, there are many Shenshui Palace disciples practicing martial arts. There are many kinds of secret martial arts of Shenshui Palace. Unlike Fei, the immortal sect specializes in sword training. So some people practice swordsmanship, some people practice swordsmanship, some people practice palm skills, and some people practice boxing skills. Of course, there are the most disciples practicing swordsmanship. The two most commonly used weapons in the arena are swords. There are many female disciples in Shenshui Palace, so naturally there are more people practicing swordsmanship. A group of women in white clothes stood together and practiced swordsmanship. The light of the swords was misty and the shadows of the swords were heavy. That graceful figure made many male disciples around him stare blankly and involuntarily become distracted. A male disciple who was practicing boxing looked straight at the female disciple practicing swordsmanship. He punched out without paying attention to the front, and hit his fellow disciple directly on the lower back. The senior brother wailed and flew out, lying on the ground like a toad. The surrounding disciples burst out laughing, and the female sword-practicing disciple also had a smile on her lips and couldn't help but laugh. This kind of thing happens every day, they have long been accustomed to it. Wang Dali, what are you doing? Where are your eyes looking? The beaten senior brother got up, covered his lower back and cursed loudly. If his waist was broken, his happiness in the rest of his life would be gone. Wang Dali covered his forehead with a bitter smile, and quickly nodded and apologized. The person responsible for teaching martial arts, when the elder saw this, he did not get angry. He just glared at Wang Dali and told him to be more serious. The elder knew what the atmosphere was like inside the Shenshui Palace. With so many female disciples around, male disciples can only concentrate on learning martial arts. It's a ghost. In the main hall of Shenshui Palace, Xiao Shuixian, the master of Shenshui Palace, sat cross-legged in the middle of the top of the hall. In front of him were 3 masters and elders, 2 women and 1 man. Xiao Shuixian's beautiful face was covered with frost, and it was so gloomy that water could drip from it. The faces of the other 3 elders are not good looking either. It's been more than a month, and the murderer of Wuchen hasn't been found yet. Xiao Shuixian gritted his teeth and asked, his voice was cold and full of frost. An elder replied, "Palace master, please calm down. It's not that the disciples didn't care, but that the murderer of the young palace master did not leave any traces." The palace master knew that after the young palace master entered Jinling city, he had a conflict with the Jin Yiwei. A female Behu led a team to capture the young palace master. According to our investigation, the female Behu is the princess of Dazhu, with the title of Princess Xinran. She is the only daughter of the king of Huainan, the southern barrier, and has a distinguished status. Moreover, Xia Xinran and Jin Yiwei Kinhu Xiao Wuji have left Beijing to perform a mission, and we cannot find their whereabouts. We also sent disciples to investigate Xiao Wuji's home, but there are experts in Xiao's mansion. That person was Gongsun Ao, the seventh spear sect on the earth ranking. All the disciples who went to Xiao mansion were killed by Gongsun Ao's gun. There is really nothing we can do. Humph, there's nothing you can do? Xiao. Shuixian snorted coldly and cursed, "My child is dead, but you tell me that there is nothing you can do. Do you want to die? What if Shenshui Palace is full of trash like you? What else do I need from you?" A cold murderous aura erupted from Xiao Shuixian's body, covering the entire sect hall. The three elders lowered their heads at the same time, trembling with fear, and did not dare to reply. Even though Xiao Shuixian is a woman, she is ruthless in her actions and vicious in heart. Man. It was precisely by relying on vicious and ruthless methods that Xiao Shuixian killed his rival and became the master of Shenshui Palace. Later, Xiao Shuixian broke through to the realm of Grand Master, and the entire Shenshui Palace was no longer. No one dares to disobey Xiao Shuixian. Shenshui Palace is already Xiao Shuixian's sole proprietor. She can beat whoever she wants, and kill whoever she wants. If there is any disobedience, it will be 100 times more miserable than before. Regardless of whether she is the princess or a member of the Imperial Guard Kinhu, as long as there is a possibility that she is the murderer of Wuchen, I will not let him go. Continue to send people to investigate for me. If they can't be found, don't come back. Let me die outside. 5.3. His beloved son was killed. Xiao Shuixian was almost crazy, and his cold eyes were full of killing intent. But at this moment, a majestic and domineering voice suddenly sounded outside. Xiao Shuixian, the master of the Shenshui Palace, has committed countless sins and committed extremely heinous crimes that are unforgivable in the world. I uphold justice for heaven and issue a death edict. The Shenshui Palace must be destroyed. The majestic voice was like thunder, reverberating within dozens of miles. The moment the voice sounded, the clouds swept over the Shenshui Palace, and the wind and clouds changed color. Endless power of heaven and earth surged in from all directions, forming a huge palm, falling from the sky towards the main hall of Shenshui Palace. The moment the giant palm appeared, countless Sanskrit sounds were heard in the surroundings. The clouds in the sky emitted golden light, as if there were countless Buddhas sitting cross-legged among the clouds, reciting Buddhist sutras. Xiao Shuixian and the three elders listened. Hearing the sound, they rushed out of the hall as soon as possible. The four people looked up at the sky, all with dull faces and chills in their bodies and minds. Looking at the huge palm falling from the sky, they felt nothing but fear in their hearts. In front of that huge palm, they were as small as ants. Thousands of Shenshui Palace disciples in the martial arts field also saw the huge palm falling from the sky at this moment. They all looked dull and all the weapons in their hands fell to the ground. Some people showed a terrified smile, and some people smiling in despair, some people slumped on the ground, and some people slapped themselves wildly, trying to wake up from this nightmare.